Zeno's dichotomy paradox of movement and space. Imagine you're standing at the start of a path, aiming to reach a distant point. A tree at the end of a quiet, sunlit road, a finish line in a race, or even just the other side of the room. Logically, you must first travel halfway to your destination. Once you've covered that first half, you must then travel half of the remaining distance. But once you reach that point, you still have a bit left to go, so you must again cover half of what remains. This process continues infinitely. Every time you move forward, there is still some fraction of the journey left to complete. According to this reasoning, motion becomes an endless sequence of ever smaller steps, never quite reaching the final destination. If every movement requires completing an infinite number of steps, then shouldn't reaching the end be impossible? And yet, in reality, we reach our destinations effortlessly, whether we're walking, running, or even driving a car at high speeds. This paradox was first formulated by the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea, a student of Parmenides in the 5th century BCE. Zeno proposed several paradoxes, all intended to challenge the conventional understanding of motion and change. His teacher, Parmenides, argued that change itself is an illusion and that the universe is one unchanging, indivisible whole. Zeno's paradoxes were designed to support this idea, showing that motion, something we all take for granted, is logically impossible when analyzed mathematically. However, for centuries, people have intuitively rejected this paradox. We see movement happening every day. We watch birds fly, rivers flow, and runners cross the finish line. We experience motion firsthand, so how could it possibly be an illusion? Understanding the paradox. The dichotomy paradox states that before an object or person can reach their final destination, they must first cover half the total distance. Once this is achieved, they must cover half of the remaining distance, and then half of that, continuing infinitely. The paradox suggests that since there are infinitely many steps, motion should never be completed. Let's take a practical example. Imagine a sprinter running a 100-meter race. According to Zeno, the runner must first travel 50 meters, halfway. Then they must cover half of the remaining distance, which is 25 meters, bringing the total to 75 meters. Next, they must cover half of the remaining 25 meters, which is 12.5 meters, making the total 87.5 meters. This pattern continues indefinitely. 100 equals 50 plus 25 plus 12.5 plus 6.25 plus 3.125 plus. This mathematical sequence is known as an infinite series. Since an infinite number of steps must be completed, the paradox suggests that the runner can never actually reach the finish line. If every step requires completing yet another fraction of the distance, how is it possible for the runner to finish the race? Why this seems counterintuitive. Despite the paradox, we know from experience that people finish races, cars reach their destinations, and planes land at airports. If motion were truly impossible, our entire understanding of movement and physics would collapse. This contradiction makes Zeno's paradox deeply unsettling because it appears to be both logically sound and practically false at the same time. The core of the paradox lies in our intuitive misunderstanding of infinity. The idea that an infinite number of steps must be taken before reaching a destination seems to imply an infinite amount of time. However, mathematics provides a solution to this problem, which we will explore later. Historical context. Zeno's motives. Zeno's paradoxes were not just abstract thought experiments. They were formulated as part of a broader philosophical argument. Zeno was a student of Parmenides, another Greek philosopher who argued that all change is an illusion. Parmenides believed that reality is one unchanging, indivisible whole, and that motion and plurality, the idea that multiple things exist, are mere illusions of the senses. Zeno created his paradoxes to support Parmenides' view, showing that if we assume motion is real, we run into logical contradictions. His paradoxes, including the dichotomy paradox, were meant to prove that our perception of movement is fundamentally flawed. Although Parmenides' ideas did not gain mainstream acceptance, Zeno's paradoxes have endured as profound philosophical and mathematical challenges. They force us to examine the nature of space, time, and continuity. Mathematical resolution. The concept of convergent infinite series. Mathematics provides a way to resolve the dichotomy paradox using the concept of limits and infinite series. While it is true that the number of steps in the sequence 50 meters, 25 meters, 12.5 meters, etc., is infinite, the total sum of these distances is finite. In modern mathematics, the sum of an infinite geometric series can be calculated using the formula S equals A/1R, where S is the sum of the series, A is the first term, in this case 50 meters, R is the common ratio, in this case 0.5, since each term is half of the previous one. Applying the formula S equals 50/1-0.5 equals 50 divided by 0.5 is equal to 100. This result shows that although the series has an infinite number of terms, its total sum is a finite number, 100 meters. This mathematical breakthrough explains why a runner can complete the race despite the seemingly infinite number of steps. The key idea here is that while the number of steps is infinite, the time required to complete each step decreases exponentially. In practical terms, this means that the total journey is completed in a finite amount of time. The role of calculus. In the 17th century, mathematicians Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz developed calculus, which provides a framework for dealing with infinite processes. Through the concept of limits, calculus explains how infinite sequences can converge to finite values. Using calculus, we can determine that the sum of the infinite series describing the dichotomy paradox approaches a limit, 100 meters in our example, proving that motion is indeed possible. This resolution does not necessarily disprove Zeno's paradox, but rather clarifies the mathematical misunderstanding at its core. The paradox assumes that an infinite number of tasks requires an infinite amount of time, but calculus shows that this is not the case. Philosophical implications. Even though mathematics resolves the paradox, deeper philosophical questions remain. 1. Is space infinitely divisible? The dichotomy paradox assumes that space can be divided into infinitely small parts. However, modern physics suggests that there may be a fundamental smallest unit of space, known as the Planck length, approximately 1.6 times 10-35 meters. If space is not infinitely divisible, Zeno's argument may not even apply to reality. 2. Is time infinitely divisible? If time is continuous, then theoretically, an infinite number of moments exist between any 2 points in time. However, if time is composed of discrete ticks at the quantum level, then Zeno's reasoning might not hold. 3. Does motion require a continuous medium? The paradox challenges the nature of motion itself. Is movement a smooth transition through space, or does it happen in small, unnoticeable jumps? Quantum mechanics hints that at very small scales, motion may not be continuous but rather discrete. What does this mean for our perception of reality? If our sensory experience of motion is merely an illusion, does that mean our entire perception of reality is flawed? Philosophers and physicists continue to explore whether Zeno's paradoxes point to deeper truths about the universe. Modern scientific perspective. Modern physics, particularly quantum mechanics and relativity, has offered new ways to think about Zeno's paradoxes. 1. Quantum mechanics. The Planck length suggests a possible lower limit to how small distances can be divided. If space is quantized, then Zeno's assumption of infinite divisibility is incorrect. 2. Special relativity. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, motion is relative, and time does not flow uniformly for all observers. This complicates the assumptions underlying Zeno's paradoxes, as time itself is not an absolute constant. 3. Computational theory of motion. Some modern interpretations propose that motion is not a continuous function but rather a series of discrete states processed at extremely high speeds, much like frames in a video. This view aligns with the idea that movement occurs in quantum jumps, rather than smooth transitions. Conclusion. The dichotomy paradox is a fascinating example of how logical reasoning can lead to seemingly impossible conclusions. While mathematics, specifically calculus, resolves the paradox by showing that infinite sequences can sum to finite values, the deeper philosophical implications remain. The paradox forces us to question our assumptions about space, time, and motion. As scientific understanding advances, we may yet discover that Zeno's paradoxes reveal fundamental truths about the universe that are still beyond our grasp. Birthday paradox. The birthday paradox is one of the most fascinating examples of how probability can defy our intuition. It reveals that in a group of just 23 people, there is a greater than 50% chance that at least 2 of them share the same birthday. This surprising result feels counterintuitive because, with 365 days in a year, it seems unlikely that such a small group could produce a match. However, once we delve into the underlying mathematics, the logic becomes clear, demonstrating the hidden complexities of probability theory. Breaking down the birthday paradox. To truly understand why the birthday paradox holds, it's essential to look at the way probabilities are calculated and how our intuition often misleads us. The probability of no shared birthdays, a deep dive. The birthday paradox presents a fascinating twist on probability, and the best way to understand it is by focusing on the complementary problem. What is the probability that no 2 people in a group share the same birthday? This approach simplifies the problem and helps break it down into manageable steps. Let's walk through this method in greater detail, explaining each part carefully. Step-by-step breakdown. Calculating no shared birthdays. Imagine you're in a room and people start walking in one by one. The goal is to calculate the chance that every new person who enters the room has a birthday that no one else in the room shares. We assume the following. 1. That there are 365 possible birthdays, ignoring leap years for simplicity. 2. Every birthday is equally likely. 3. Birthdays are independent. One person's birthday doesn't influence another's. Let's explore how the probability evolves as more people enter. Person 1. A free choice. The first person to enter has the entire year to choose from. There are no restrictions since no one else is in the room. Probability of a unique birthday for person 1. 365 divided by 365 is equal to 1. This is 100% since they're the first. Person 2. Avoiding one birthday. The second person must avoid the birthday of the first person to keep all birthdays unique. Since one day is already taken, there are 364 remaining available birthdays. Probability for person 2, 364 of 365. This means there's about a 99.73% chance the second person doesn't share a birthday with the first. Person 3, 2 birthdays taken. Now, the third person has to avoid the birthdays of both the first and second people. There are now 363 available days out of 365. Probability for person 3, 363 of 365. This equates to a 99.45% chance that the third person picks a unique birthday. Continuing the pattern. Each new person has one fewer available birthday to choose from than the previous person. The probabilities for each additional person would look like this. Person 4, 362 of 365. Person 5, 361 of 365. Person 23, 343 of 365. The probability that all 23 people have unique birthdays is the product of all these individual probabilities. The full probability expression. The combined probability that no 2 people in a room of 23 share the same birthday is P. No shared birthday equals 365 asterisk 364/365 asterisk 363/365 asterisk 343/365. This can be simplified using factorials as P n equals 365 / 365 n asterisk 365 to the power of n, where 365 is the factorial of 365, the product of all integers from 1 to 365. N is the number of people, in this case 23. 365 to the power of n represents all the possible birthday combinations for n people. The final probability. When you compute the full product for 23 people, the probability that no 2 share a birthday comes out to approximately P, no shared birthday, is almost equal to 0.4927. This means there's about a 49.27% chance that no one shares a birthday in a room of 23 people. Flipping the question, at least one shared birthday. Since the probability that no two people share a birthday is about 49.27%, we can easily find the probability that at least two people share a birthday by subtracting this from 1. P, at least one shared birthday, equals 1 minus 0.4927 equals 0.5073. This reveals the surprising result. There's a 50.73% chance, better than even odds, that at least two people in a group of 23 share a birthday. Why this feels counterintuitive? The result seems perplexing because our intuition typically misjudges the nature of combinations and probabilities. Here's why. 1. We think linearly. People tend to think in a linear fashion. Since there are 365 days in a year, it seems that you'd need at least half that number, around 183 people, to have a 50% chance of a match. But the problem involves comparing every possible pair, not matching to a specific birthday. 2. Combinatorial explosion. The number of possible pairs increases rapidly with each additional person. In a group of 23 there are unique pairs. Each of these pairs has a chance of sharing a birthday, greatly increasing the overall probability of a match. 3. Probability versus intuition. Our intuition tends to underestimate the likelihood of coincidences in complex systems. The birthday paradox is a classic example of how even simple probabilistic systems can yield non-intuitive results. Beyond 23 people, scaling the problem. If you increase the number of people in the room, the probability of shared birthdays increases rapidly. 30 people, 70% chance of a shared birthday. 40 people, 89% chance. 50 people, 97% chance. 70 people, 99.9% chance. This shows how quickly the odds stack in favor of shared birthdays. Calculating the probability of no shared birthdays is often simpler than calculating the chance of at least one match directly. Using this method, we find that in a group of just 23 people, there's a greater than 50% chance that at least two people share a birthday. The result is a testament to how probability often defies our expectations, especially when combinatorics comes into play. Finding the probability of at least one match. Finding the probability of at least one shared birthday becomes straightforward once we have calculated the probability of no shared birthdays. This method takes advantage of a common principle in probability theory. Sometimes it is easier to calculate the complement of what you're looking for and then subtract that result from 1. In the case of the birthday paradox, directly calculating the probability of at least one match among 23 people would require analyzing all the potential overlapping birthday scenarios, an overwhelmingly complex task. Instead, by first determining the probability that no two people share a birthday, we can then flip the result to find the desired probability of at least one match. The formula for this is simple. P, at least one shared birthday, equals 1 minus P, no shared birthday. Since we have already found that the probability of no shared birthdays in a room of 23 people is approximately 0.4927, or 49.27%, the probability that at least two people do share a birthday becomes P, at least one shared birthday, equals 1 minus 0.4927 equals 0.5073. This result reveals that in a room of just 23 people, there is a 50.73% chance, slightly better than even odds, that at least two people will have the same birthday. This finding often surprises people, as their intuition tends to suggest that such a match should be far less likely, given the 365 days in a year. The surprising nature of this result stems from how we mentally frame the problem. When people think of birthday matches, they often focus on their own birthday and wonder about the odds that someone else in the room shares it. However, the birthday paradox isn't about matching a specific date, it's about any two people sharing a birthday. This distinction is crucial. While the odds that someone else shares your birthday in a room of 23 people are quite low, around 6.3%, the odds that any two people share a birthday increase significantly because of the sheer number of potential pairings. The number of unique pairs grows rapidly as more people enter the room. With 23 people, there are 253 distinct pairs, calculated using the combination formula, where n is the number of people. Each of these 253 pairs presents an opportunity for a shared birthday, and even though the probability of a match for any single pair is low, the cumulative effect of so many pairs makes a birthday match more likely than not. This is a classic example of how probability can defy our intuition. People often underestimate how quickly probabilities compound when multiple independent events are considered together. In the birthday paradox, the key isn't the number of people alone but how many connections exist between them. Every new person added to the group doesn't just increase the total number of people. They also increase the number of pairs that can be formed, boosting the odds of a match. The result, 50.73% for 23 people, illustrates how combinatorics can lead to unintuitive outcomes. While it may seem unlikely at first, the math is sound and countless real-world experiments have confirmed the paradox. In fact, it has become a popular party trick to test this concept in groups of 20 to 30 people, often resulting in a surprising birthday match. The birthday paradox serves as a powerful reminder of the gap between human intuition and mathematical reality, especially when it comes to probability. It shows how our minds struggle to grasp the effects of combinations and the compounding nature of probabilities in group settings. Why does this feel so counterintuitive? The birthday paradox feels so counterintuitive because our natural instincts about probability often lead us astray, especially when it comes to problems involving combinations and pairwise comparisons. When most people first hear that only 23 people are needed in a room to have a better than even chance that two people share the same birthday, their initial reaction is disbelief. After all, with 365 possible birthdays, 23 seems like too small a number to expect a match. This misconception arises from focusing on the wrong aspect of the problem. Intuitively, many people frame the question as, what is the chance that someone in the group shares my birthday? In that case, the probability is quite low, just 1/365, or about 0.27%. This framing makes the scenario seem unlikely. However, the actual problem isn't about matching a specific birthday but about whether any two people in the room share a birthday. This subtle shift in focus changes the dynamics completely. The crux of the paradox lies in the rapid growth of possible pairings as the group size increases. In a room with 23 people, you aren't just comparing each person's birthday to a single target date, you're comparing every possible pair of people to see if they share a birthday. The number of unique pairs in a group is given by the combination formula, n1/2, where n is the number of people. For 23 people, this results in 23 by 22/2 is equal to 253 unique pairs. Each of these 253 pairs represents an opportunity for a birthday match. Even though the probability of any single pair sharing a birthday is low, about 1/365, the sheer number of comparisons causes the overall probability of at least one match to rise significantly. This is where human intuition struggles. We tend to think linearly, underestimating how combinations grow with increasing group size. Our brains are good at assessing simple probabilities, but when multiple events interact, like in the case of 253 potential pairs, we fail to account for how quickly the chances accumulate. Another factor contributing to the counterintuitive nature of the paradox is the misunderstanding of randomness. People often expect random distributions to spread evenly across possibilities, so they assume that 23 people would naturally avoid overlap among 365 days. But randomness doesn't guarantee even distribution, especially in small samples. Overlaps and clusters are more common than our intuition suggests. This mental bias is similar to how people misjudge randomness in other contexts, like flipping a coin or shuffling cards. We expect a random sequence to look balanced and orderly, but true randomness often results in streaks, clusters, and patterns that seem non-random. In the case of the birthday paradox, the combination of exponential growth in pairings and our flawed intuition about randomness creates a scenario that feels surprising, even though the math is straightforward. It's a powerful example of how probability can defy our expectations and why a deeper understanding of statistical reasoning is crucial in interpreting seemingly unlikely events. Scaling the birthday paradox. The paradox becomes even more striking when you look at how quickly the probability increases as more people are added to the room. 30 people, 70% chance of a shared birthday. 50 people, 97% chance. 70 people, 99.9% chance. This rapid increase demonstrates how probability can scale in non-intuitive ways, especially when considering combinations and pairings. Generalizing the birthday problem. The birthday paradox can be generalized beyond just birthdays. It applies to any scenario where you're looking for matching elements within a set. For example, in computer science, the paradox is relevant to hash functions. If you hash a group of inputs, the probability of two different inputs producing the same hash, a collision, increases faster than you might expect, similar to the birthday paradox. This principle is the basis for certain cryptographic attacks known as birthday attacks, which exploit the high probability of collisions in hash functions. Real-life applications and implications. While the birthday paradox may initially seem like an amusing mathematical quirk, its implications stretch far beyond the confines of theoretical probability. This paradox has found meaningful applications in diverse fields ranging from cryptography to data science, education, and even social dynamics. Its counterintuitive nature serves not only as a powerful teaching tool but also as a foundation for practical solutions in technology and human behavior analysis. In cryptography, the birthday paradox plays a crucial role, especially in understanding vulnerabilities in hash functions. Cryptographic hash functions are designed to convert input data into a fixed-size string of characters, which acts as a digital fingerprint for the data. Ideally, no two different inputs should produce the same hash output, a scenario known as a collision. However, the birthday paradox reveals that such collisions are more likely than intuition suggests. This principle forms the basis of what's known as a birthday attack in cryptography. In a birthday attack, a malicious actor attempts to find two distinct inputs that generate the same hash, exploiting the higher-than-expected probability of collisions. To mitigate this risk, modern cryptographic systems use hash functions with large output sizes, thereby reducing the likelihood of collisions even when processing vast amounts of data. In data science and statistics, the birthday paradox has practical implications in understanding and managing data collisions. For instance, when assigning unique identifiers, such as usernames, product codes, or session tokens, the paradox highlights how, even in large sets of seemingly unique data points, collisions can occur sooner than expected. This awareness helps data scientists design systems that account for and minimize the risk of duplicate entries. It also plays a role in randomized algorithms, where understanding the probability of duplicate results is essential for ensuring efficiency and accuracy. The paradox is also an invaluable tool in probability theory and education. It serves as a captivating example to illustrate how human intuition can misinterpret probabilities, especially in scenarios involving combinations and large data sets. Teachers often use the birthday paradox to engage students in discussions about independent events, combinatorics, and probability calculations. Its approachable premise, sharing birthdays, makes complex mathematical concepts more relatable and easier to grasp, fostering deeper understanding of foundational probability principles. Beyond mathematics and technology, the birthday paradox extends its reach into game theory and social dynamics. It helps explain why commonalities or connections appear more frequently in large groups than we might expect. Consider the popular concept of 6 degrees of separation, which suggests that any two people on Earth are connected through no more than 6 acquaintances. The same principle underlies social networks, where mutual friends or shared interests often emerge in surprisingly small circles. The birthday paradox sheds light on these social phenomena by illustrating how connections multiply rapidly as group size increases, making overlaps and commonalities statistically inevitable. In essence, the birthday paradox transcends its status as a mathematical curiosity, offering real-world insights that impact various fields. It underscores the importance of statistical literacy, not only in academic settings but also in the design and analysis of systems that govern technology, data management, and even human interaction. Philosophical considerations. The birthday paradox not only fascinates mathematicians and statisticians but also sparks intriguing philosophical questions about randomness, human cognition, and the limits of intuition. One of the most compelling aspects of the paradox is how it exposes the gap between mathematical reality and how our minds instinctively assess probabilities. When people first hear that just 23 individuals in a room create a better than even chance of shared birthdays, their natural reaction is often disbelief. This reaction highlights a fundamental flaw in human reasoning. Our brains are not naturally equipped to process large numbers, combinations, or the complex relationships that emerge in nonlinear systems. At its core, the paradox challenges our understanding of randomness. While we often think of random events as rare or isolated, the birthday paradox reveals that randomness can produce patterns and overlaps more frequently than we intuitively expect. This raises philosophical questions about the nature of chance and how we perceive it. Are coincidences as rare as they seem, or do they simply feel that way because of our cognitive biases? Additionally, the paradox forces us to confront the limitations of human intuition in evaluating risk and probability. In everyday life, we rely heavily on heuristics, mental shortcuts that help us make quick judgments. However, these shortcuts often fail in probabilistic scenarios, leading to systematic errors in reasoning. The birthday paradox exemplifies this cognitive blind spot, reminding us that intuition is not always a reliable guide when dealing with complex statistical phenomena. Philosophically, the paradox encourages a deeper reflection on the importance of critical thinking and the need to rely on mathematical reasoning over gut feelings, especially in fields like science, economics, and decision-making. It highlights the value of questioning our assumptions and embracing the often counterintuitive truths that mathematics can reveal about the world. Deeper dive. Mathematical derivation. Let's explore the general formula for the birthday problem. If n is the number of people in the room, the probability that no two people share a birthday is Pn equals 364/365 times 364/365 times 363/365 times 365n plus 1/365. This can also be written as Pn equals 365/365n times 365, where 365 factorial represents the product of all integers from 1 to 365. For large n, calculating factorials becomes complex, so approximations like the Taylor series or Poisson distribution can be used to estimate probabilities more efficiently. Conclusion. The birthday paradox is a powerful example of how probability can defy our expectations. It shows that in scenarios involving large numbers of combinations, our intuition often fails us. Despite the seemingly low odds, a group of just 23 people has a better than even chance of sharing a birthday. This paradox is more than just a mathematical curiosity. It has real-world applications in fields like cryptography, statistics, and computer science. Most importantly, it serves as a reminder of the beauty and complexity of probability theory and how even the simplest questions can reveal profound truths about randomness and chance. So, next time you're at a party, think twice before betting someone that no two people share a birthday. You might be surprised at how often you lose. Crocodile paradox. At its core, the crocodile paradox involves a conditional statement that becomes self-referential, leading to a contradiction. The scenario can be outlined as follows. 1. Premise. A crocodile has taken a child and tells the parent, "I will return your child if and only if you correctly predict whether I will return the child." 2. Parent's prediction. The parent must make a prediction about the crocodile's action. 3. Crocodile's response. The crocodile decides to either return the child or keep the child based on the parent's prediction and the stipulated condition. The paradox arises when the parent's prediction creates a situation where the crocodile cannot fulfill its promise without leading to a contradiction. Analyzing the paradox. To delve deeper into the logical intricacies, consider the two possible predictions a parent might make. 1. Prediction. You will return my child. If the crocodile returns the child, the parent's prediction is correct, satisfying the crocodile's condition. Oh, if the crocodile does not return the child, the parent's prediction is incorrect, and the crocodile keeps the child, which aligns with the condition. In this case, there is no paradox. The crocodile can act without contradiction. 2. Prediction: you will not return my child. Oh, if the crocodile returns the child, the parent's prediction is incorrect, which should mean the crocodile keeps the child. However, by returning the child, the crocodile violates its own condition. Oh, if the crocodile does not return the child, the parent's prediction is correct, and according to the crocodile's promise, the child should be returned. This creates a contradiction, as the crocodile cannot both keep and return the child simultaneously. The second scenario exemplifies the paradox. The crocodile's promise leads to a situation where any action it takes results in a logical inconsistency. Philosophical implications. The crocodile paradox serves as more than a mere logical puzzle. It delves into the complexities of self-reference, conditional statements, and the nature of promises. Several philosophical themes emerge from this paradox. 1. Self-reference and paradox. Similar to the liar paradox, where a statement refers to itself in a way that creates a contradiction, this statement is false. The crocodile paradox involves a promise that references its own fulfillment, leading to an irresolvable loop. 2. Conditional promises. The paradox highlights the challenges inherent in promises that are contingent upon predictions about the promiser's own actions. It questions the feasibility of such promises and whether they can ever be meaningfully fulfilled. 3. Meta-knowledge. The scenario explores the concept of knowledge about knowledge. The crocodile's promise requires the parent to have knowledge of the crocodile's future action, which is itself based on the parent's prediction, creating a complex web of meta-knowledge. Modern interpretations and discussions. In contemporary philosophy and logic, the crocodile paradox continues to be a subject of interest, particularly in discussions about self-reference and epistemology. On platforms like Philosophy Stack Exchange, thinkers engage with the paradox to explore its nuances and implications. One user, Nemesis TS, presents a logical analysis of the paradox, breaking down the possible scenarios based on the parent's prediction and the crocodile's response. The analysis suggests that the paradox arises specifically when the parent's prediction is that the child will not be returned. In this case, the crocodile faces a contradiction. Returning the child would falsify the parent's prediction, violating the promise, while not returning the child would validate the prediction, also violating the promise. This modern examination underscores the enduring complexity and relevance of the paradox in logical discourse. Comparisons to other paradoxes. The crocodile paradox shares similarities with other well-known paradoxes, offering insights into the nature of self-reference and logical consistency. Unexpected hanging paradox. In this paradox, a prisoner is told they will be hanged on an unexpected day in the coming week. The prisoner attempts to deduce the day of the hanging, leading to a contradiction when the hanging occurs on a day they did not anticipate. Both paradoxes involve predictions about future events that lead to self-referential inconsistencies. Liar paradox. The statement, "this sentence is false," creates a contradiction, as it cannot consistently be true or false. Similarly, the crocodile paradox involves a promise that cannot be fulfilled without leading to a contradiction, as the action taken affects the truth of the initial prediction. Resolving the paradox. Attempts to resolve the crocodile paradox often involve scrutinizing the conditions of the crocodile's promise and the nature of the parent's prediction. Some approaches suggest that the paradox arises from a flawed premise. The crocodile's promise may not be logically coherent to begin with. If a promise's fulfillment is dependent on a prediction that directly influences the conditions of that promise, then it creates a self-referential loop that is impossible to resolve. In this view, the paradox is not an actual logical problem but an illustration of how certain conditions can be inherently contradictory. Another potential resolution comes from epistemic logic, which studies knowledge and belief. One could argue that for the parent's prediction to be meaningful, they must have knowledge of the crocodile's decision-making process. However, if the crocodile itself determines its action based on the parent's prediction, then there is no independent basis for knowledge, leading to an epistemic deadlock. In other words, the paradox highlights the limits of knowledge when it is circularly dependent on itself. Applications of the paradox in philosophy and logic. Beyond its role as a philosophical puzzle, the crocodile paradox has been used to illustrate broader concepts in logic, epistemology, and decision theory. 1. Game theory and strategic decision-making. In game theory, players make decisions based on the anticipated responses of others. The crocodile's promise introduces a strategic dilemma. The parent must predict an action that is itself contingent on their prediction. This resembles certain real-world strategic situations, such as negotiations or contracts where each party's decision affects the outcome for both sides. For example, in economic bargaining, one party may make an offer conditional on the expected response of the other, leading to complex loops of strategic reasoning. 2. Self-referential systems and formal logic. The paradox demonstrates issues that arise in self-referential systems, much like Gödel's incompleteness theorems in mathematical logic. Gödel showed that any sufficiently powerful formal system would contain statements that are undecidable, neither provably true nor provably false within the system itself. The crocodile's promise exhibits a similar problem. Its truth depends on a prediction that changes based on its own truth conditions. 3. Legal and ethical implications. The paradox can be related to certain legal and ethical dilemmas involving conditional agreements. Consider a legal contract that states, "If you correctly predict whether I will uphold this contract, then I will uphold it." Such a contract would be unenforceable because the validity of its fulfillment is entirely dependent on the act of prediction. In ethical reasoning, this touches on problems of moral commitments that become paradoxical when tied to uncertain conditions. Variants and extensions of the crocodile paradox. Over time, philosophers have proposed various modifications and extensions of the crocodile paradox to explore different logical and epistemological dimensions. 1. The judge's dilemma. A variant of the paradox involves a judge who tells a defendant, "If you correctly predict your sentence, I will change it." If the defendant predicts a light sentence, the judge might respond by imposing a harsh one, contradicting the prediction. Conversely, if the defendant predicts a harsh sentence, the judge must give a lighter one, again contradicting the statement. This mirrors the crocodile's promise in that any attempt to fulfill the condition results in a contradiction. 2. The Sorites paradox connection. The paradox also shares similarities with the Sorites paradox, which involves vague predicates. Suppose a crocodile takes a child and states, "I will return the child if you give me a sufficiently small number of coins." The parent, wanting to keep their money, gives only one coin. But the crocodile then demands another, arguing that one more is still a small number. This process can continue indefinitely, creating a paradox of gradual change. 3. Epistemic uncertainty and the crocodile's decision. Another interpretation explores the crocodile's decision-making process. What if the crocodile itself is uncertain about what it will do? If the crocodile does not have prior knowledge of its own action, then its promise collapses into indeterminacy. This highlights problems in epistemic logic, where an agent's knowledge about its own future actions may be incomplete. The paradox in modern thought. While the crocodile paradox originated in ancient philosophy, it continues to be relevant in contemporary discussions about self-referential systems, paradoxes in artificial intelligence, and the limits of logical reasoning. 1. Artificial intelligence and recursive decision-making. In AI research, decision-making systems sometimes encounter paradoxes when processing self-referential conditions. Suppose an AI is programmed with a rule: if you can predict your own response to this question, change your response. This creates a recursive feedback loop similar to the crocodile paradox. Understanding such paradoxes can help improve AI algorithms by refining how they handle self-referential conditions. 2. Quantum mechanics and observer dependence. Some physicists draw analogies between the paradox and the role of observation in quantum mechanics. In the famous Schrödinger's cat thought experiment, the cat's state, alive or dead, depends on whether it is observed. Similarly, the crocodile's action depends on a prediction that influences itself, creating an observer-dependent scenario. 3. Postmodern interpretations of truth and meaning. Postmodern philosophers, particularly those interested in language and meaning, use the crocodile paradox to explore how statements derive their truth conditions. If meaning depends on a circular structure of reference, then absolute truth may be elusive. This idea resonates with thinkers like Jacques Derrida, who argued that meaning is always deferred within a network of signs, much like the crocodile's promise defers its own fulfillment. Historical context. The origins of the crocodile paradox trace back to ancient Greek philosophy. Lucian of Samosata, a satirist from the 2nd century AD, attributes the paradox to the Stoic philosopher Chrysippus in his dialogue, The Sale of Creeds. In this work, Chrysippus is portrayed discussing various logical puzzles, including the crocodile scenario, to illustrate the complexities of self-referential statements and conditional promises. The paradox was later documented by Quintilian in his Institutes of Oratory, highlighting its significance in rhetorical and logical studies of the time. The crocodile paradox remains one of the most intriguing logical puzzles, offering insights into the complexities of conditional promises, self-referential statements, and epistemic uncertainty. While attempts have been made to resolve the paradox by questioning the coherence of the crocodile's promise or applying probabilistic reasoning, it ultimately serves as a valuable tool for exploring broader issues in logic, philosophy, and decision theory. By examining its implications across various disciplines, from formal logic to artificial intelligence, the paradox continues to challenge our understanding of knowledge, prediction, and the limitations of rational reasoning. Whether viewed as an ancient puzzle or a modern problem in epistemic logic, the crocodile paradox demonstrates how a seemingly simple scenario can reveal profound contradictions at the heart of human thought. The drinking paradox. The drinking paradox states that in any bar, there is always at least one customer for whom it is true that if they are drinking, everyone else is drinking. At first glance, this statement seems unusual. It might sound like a claim about social influence, that one person's drinking dictates everyone else's behavior, but that's not the case. Instead, it is a logical paradox based on conditional statements. To fully understand it, we must break down the structure of if X, then Y statements in formal logic. Conditional logic and its role in the paradox. A conditional statement in logic takes the form of if P then Q. This means that whenever P is true, Q must also be true. One key detail in classical logic is that if P is false, the entire statement is still considered true because the condition has not been violated. This concept can seem counterintuitive, but it plays a crucial role in understanding the drinking paradox. In the context of the paradox, the statement, if one person is drinking, then everyone else is drinking, does not mean that a single person's decision to drink is the cause of everyone else drinking. Instead, it reflects a logical truth that holds in every scenario. The challenge is recognizing how the statement remains valid regardless of the number of people drinking. Examining the different scenarios. To fully grasp the drinking paradox, it is essential to analyze different scenarios in a bar setting, considering various distributions of drinkers and non-drinkers. The paradox hinges on the logical structure of conditional statements, not on real-world social behavior. By working through each possible scenario, we can see why the paradox holds true in all cases, even when it appears counterintuitive. Scenario 1. Everyone is drinking. The simplest case occurs when every person in the bar is drinking. In this situation, the paradox is trivially true because the condition is automatically satisfied. If any individual is drinking, then everyone else in the bar is also drinking, since there is no one left out. There is no need to search for a special individual who makes the statement true, because every person in the bar already fits the condition. To illustrate, suppose there are 5 people in the bar: Alice, Bob, Carlos, Dana, and Evan. If all 5 of them have a drink in their hands, the paradox is easily confirmed. No matter which individual we choose, the statement, if they are drinking then everyone is drinking, is true because everyone already is. This scenario may not feel paradoxical at all, since the statement is simply reflecting the reality of the situation. However, the paradox's strength becomes apparent when we introduce non-drinkers into the mix. Scenario 2. One person is not drinking. The paradox becomes more interesting when not everyone is drinking. Imagine the same group of 5 people, but this time 4 of them, Alice, Bob, Carlos, and Dana, are drinking while Evan is not. The paradox states that there will always be at least one person for whom the condition holds true. In this case, Evan is that person. If Evan were to start drinking, then the entire group would be drinking, making the statement valid for him. The key here is that the paradox does not require every person to drink at the same time. Instead, it requires that at least one individual always fits the conditional statement. Even when some people are drinking and others are not, the paradox still applies because there is always at least one person for whom, if they are drinking, then everyone is drinking remains logically sound. Another way to think about this scenario is to reframe the condition. When the statement is evaluated for any of the drinkers, it remains true by default because the majority are already drinking. But when it is applied to the lone non-drinker, the truth of the statement is preserved because if they were to drink, then everyone would indeed be drinking. The paradox does not dictate real-world causality, it only asserts the validity of the logical structure. Scenario 3. A majority are not drinking. Now consider a situation where the drinking distribution is reversed. Only one person in the bar is drinking while everyone else is not. Suppose Alice is the only person drinking while Bob, Carlos, Dana, and Evan are abstaining. The paradox still holds because we can apply the statement to Alice. If she is drinking, then logically, everyone else in the bar is drinking, because she is the only individual in the drinking category. This scenario may feel unintuitive, but it follows the same logical pattern. The paradox does not require that drinking be a shared experience among many people. Instead, it ensures that the statement, if this person is drinking, then everyone is drinking remains valid. Since Alice is the only one drinking, applying the statement to her satisfies the condition in the same way it did in the previous scenarios. A common misconception is to assume that the paradox is making a real-world claim about drinking behavior. If interpreted in that way, one might be tempted to argue that Alice's drinking should not define the drinking status of the entire bar. However, in the realm of formal logic, the paradox simply asserts that at least one person always satisfies the condition, regardless of the actual drinking distribution. Scenario 4. No one is drinking. The most puzzling case occurs when no one in the bar is drinking. At first, it might seem like the paradox breaks down here, but it remains intact due to the rules of formal logic. When no one in the bar is drinking, the statement, if this person is drinking, then everyone is drinking, is still true for at least one person. This is because, in classical logic, a conditional statement where the first condition never happens is always considered true. To understand why, consider the way logic treats conditional statements. In formal logic, the statement, if P then Q, is considered true in 3 cases. 1.P is true and Q is also true. 2.P is false and Q is true. 3.P is false and Q is false. The only case in which, if P then Q, is false is when P is true, but Q is false. However, in this scenario P, the individual drinking, never occurs. Since the condition is never triggered, the statement is still considered logically true. To make this concrete, imagine our group of 5. Alice, Bob, Carlos, Dana, and Evan. None of them are drinking. If we apply the statement to any individual, it says, if they are drinking, then everyone is drinking. Since none of them are actually drinking, the if condition is never met, meaning the statement cannot be proven false. In logic, when the first condition of an if-then statement never happens, the entire statement remains true by default. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of the paradox, but it is also what makes it so intriguing. The paradox does not require that drinking actually take place. It only requires that the logical structure of the conditional statement holds true in every case. Examining the logical core of the paradox. Looking at these scenarios, it becomes clear that the drinking paradox is less about actual drinking behavior and more about how conditional statements operate. No matter how drinking is distributed within the bar, there is always at least one person for whom the logical condition applies. The paradox is not based on social interaction or real-world influence but on the structure of statements in formal logic. One of the main reasons this paradox feels strange is that humans are accustomed to thinking about causality rather than strict logical validity. In everyday life, We assume that if a statement suggests a connection between two events, there must be an actual relationship between them. The drinking paradox challenges this assumption by presenting a scenario where the statement holds true even when no real-world influence exists. By breaking down each possible scenario, it becomes evident that the paradox is always true, regardless of the number of people drinking or not drinking. Whether everyone is drinking, only a few are drinking, or no one is drinking at all, there is always at least one person for whom, if they are drinking then everyone is drinking, is a logically valid statement. This reveals the fascinating way in which formal logic can lead to results that feel counterintuitive, even when they are completely correct. Breaking it down with an example. Now that we have established that the paradox holds in both the case where most people are drinking and the case where no one is drinking, let's explore a few more variations to see how the paradox remains logically valid across different distributions of drinkers and non-drinkers. Scenario 1. One drinker among many non-drinkers. Suppose the bar contains the same 5 individuals, Alice, Bob, Carlos, Dana, and Evan, but this time only Alice is drinking while the rest are not. Intuitively, one might think that the paradox fails here since a majority of the people in the bar are not drinking. However, upon closer examination, the paradox still holds. Applying the statement to Alice, we see that if she is drinking, then everyone else in the bar is drinking. Since she is the only one drinking, this appears strange at first. But logically, the paradox is still intact. The reason is that the statement does not require that drinking be a widespread phenomenon. It only requires that at least one individual satisfies the conditional structure of the statement. Since Alice is the only drinker, when the statement is applied to her, it remains valid because the if condition is met by her action alone. This situation highlights one of the key aspects of the drinking paradox. The logical structure of the statement matters more than the real-world drinking patterns. Even if only a single person is drinking, there still exists an individual, Alice in this case, for whom the statement remains true. Scenario 2. Two separate drinking groups. Next, consider a scenario where the 5 individuals in the bar are split into 2 distinct groups. Alice and Bob are drinking while Carlos, Dana, and Evan are not. At first, it might seem like the paradox breaks down because the drinking behavior is not uniform across the bar. However, as before, the logical structure ensures that the statement still holds. For Alice and Bob, the statement, if they are drinking then everyone else is drinking, is already true among their drinking subgroup. But what about Carlos, Dana, and Evan? Looking at Evan, for example, if he were to start drinking, then we could group him with Alice and Bob, at which point the drinking majority would increase. If Dana and Carlos joined as well, eventually the entire group would be drinking. The key takeaway here is that the paradox does not require an immediate or causal relationship between drinkers. Instead, it ensures that for at least one person in the bar, the conditional statement remains valid in every case. Scenario 3. An increasing drinking chain. Let's take another dynamic example. Suppose that at first only one person, Alice, is drinking. Then Bob sees Alice drinking and decides to join. A moment later, Carlos sees that Bob is drinking and follows suit. Eventually, Dana and Evan also start drinking. While this might resemble a social chain reaction, the paradox does not depend on causality. The moment any single person joins the drinking group, the paradox is satisfied for them because they now fall under the condition that, if they are drinking then everyone is drinking. Even if we were to pause this process at a moment where only 3 out of the 5 people are drinking, the paradox would still hold. There will always be at least one person in the bar for whom, if they drink, the statement remains logically valid. Scenario 4. The bar has more than 5 people. What happens if we scale up this example? Suppose instead of 5 people, the bar contains 100 people. At any given moment, there may be different proportions of drinkers and non-drinkers, but the paradox remains unchanged. If all 100 people are drinking, the statement is trivially true. If only one person is drinking, the statement is still true for them. If 50 people are drinking, the paradox holds because for at least one person, the condition remains valid. Even in an extreme case where only one person out of 100 is drinking, that single individual still satisfies the paradox. If they are drinking, then from their perspective, everyone else, which includes only them, is drinking. The paradox continues to function independently of the number of people in the bar. This scalability reinforces the idea that the drinking paradox is not dependent on small groups but is a universal logical structure. Whether a bar has 5, 50, or 5,000 people, the paradox always applies because there is always at least one person for whom the statement is true. Addressing common misconceptions about the paradox. Since the drinking paradox is deeply rooted in formal logic, it often creates confusion when interpreted through the lens of real-world behavior. Below are some of the most common misunderstandings and clarifications. Misconception 1. The paradox implies a causal relationship. One of the biggest mistakes people make when interpreting the paradox is assuming that one person's drinking causes everyone else to drink. However, the paradox does not imply causation. It only states that there is always at least one person for whom the conditional statement holds true. The conditional structure of the statement means that it does not rely on a cause and effect mechanism. Instead, it relies purely on logical validity. Even if no one actually starts drinking, the paradox still holds because the if-then condition remains unbroken. Misconception 2. The paradox requires a majority of drinkers. Some may assume that the paradox only works when a majority of the bar is drinking. This is false. The paradox applies regardless of whether 100%, 50%, or just 1% of the people are drinking. The key insight is that there is always at least one individual in the bar for whom the statement remains true. For example, if only one person is drinking, then for that individual, the statement is valid. If no one is drinking, then the statement still holds by logical default, since the if condition is never triggered. Misconception 3. The paradox fails in real-life scenarios. Some may argue that the paradox is unrealistic because in a real bar, drinking behavior is influenced by personal choices, peer pressure, and social norms. While this is true, the paradox is not a commentary on actual drinking behavior. It is a logical construct. It is important to separate the paradox from real-world causality. The drinking paradox is a thought experiment that demonstrates how conditional logic can lead to conclusions that seem counterintuitive when applied to real life. Why this paradox matters. At first glance, the drinking paradox might seem like an amusing but trivial logical puzzle. However, it has deeper implications in the fields of philosophy, mathematics, and computer science. Understanding the structure of conditional statements is crucial in areas such as philosophy. The paradox challenges how we interpret conditional truths and highlights the gap between formal logic and everyday reasoning. Mathematics and set theory. The paradox is an example of how mathematical statements can remain valid under different conditions, helping us understand the nuances of logical statements. Computer science. Conditional logic is fundamental in programming, and understanding how statements function under different conditions is essential for writing accurate code. By exploring the drinking paradox in depth, we gain a clearer appreciation of how logic operates beyond our intuitive understanding. It serves as a powerful example of how a simple statement, when examined through formal logic, can reveal hidden complexities and challenge our assumptions about truth and reasoning. Why this paradox feels counterintuitive. Many people initially misunderstand the drinking paradox because they think about it in terms of causality, assuming that one person's drinking must somehow trigger everyone else's decision to drink. But the paradox does not describe real-world cause and effect relationships. Instead, it is purely a logical construct, relying on the rules of conditional statements. In everyday reasoning, people often assume that statements must reflect some form of real-world influence. If someone says, "If I go to the party, then all my friends will go too," they usually mean that their presence at the party will encourage others to attend. However, in formal logic, an if-then statement does not require any actual cause and effect relationship. It only requires that the condition, when true, leads to a valid conclusion. The drinking paradox plays with this formal rule, creating a statement that appears surprising but is always logically sound. Philosophical implications of the drinking paradox. Beyond just being a fun logical trick, the drinking paradox highlights important ideas about logic and reasoning. It demonstrates how formal logic can lead to conclusions that do not always align with common sense. This paradox is a reminder that human intuition often struggles when confronted with abstract logical structures. It also touches on deeper philosophical questions about language and meaning. In everyday conversation, people use conditional statements with implicit assumptions about causality and probability. When someone says, "If it rains, then I will bring an umbrella," they are making a practical statement about likelihood. But in formal logic, conditionals do not work based on probability, they work based on strict logical validity. The drinking paradox exposes this distinction by presenting a situation where a conditional statement holds true in ways that feel unnatural. Connections to other logical paradoxes. The drinking paradox belongs to a broader family of logical paradoxes that challenge our assumptions about statements and truth. It is similar to the liar paradox, where a sentence like, "This statement is false," creates a contradiction. While the drinking paradox does not lead to an outright contradiction, it creates a situation where a seemingly improbable statement is always true. Another related concept is the Sorites paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap. This paradox asks how many grains of sand must be removed from a heap before it stops being a heap. Like the drinking paradox, it forces us to reconsider how we define seemingly obvious truths. Both paradoxes reveal that logical structures sometimes produce results that feel unnatural, even though they follow strict reasoning. Final thoughts. The drinking paradox is a fascinating example of how formal logic can challenge our intuitive understanding of statements and truth. By relying on the structure of conditional statements, it creates a situation where, no matter what the drinking distribution is in a bar, there is always at least one person for whom the statement, "If they are drinking, everyone else is drinking," holds true. While this paradox does not reflect real-world social behavior, it serves as an interesting exercise in thinking more precisely about logic. It forces us to separate logical validity from causality and to recognize that truth in formal logic does not always align with our everyday experiences. The next time you find yourself in a bar, you might even test out this paradox among your friends. Just be prepared for some puzzled looks when you try to explain why it always works. Zeno's Achilles and the tortoise paradox of movement and space. Another of Zeno's famous paradoxes, the Achilles and the tortoise paradox, further explores the perplexities of motion and space. This paradox focuses on the concept of relative motion and highlights the challenges in understanding how faster objects can overtake slower ones. Imagine Achilles, the legendary Greek warrior known for his speed, competing in a race against a slow-moving tortoise. To make the race fair, Achilles gives the tortoise a head start, let's say 10 meters. Achilles runs 10 times faster than the tortoise, meaning that when Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise started, the tortoise will have moved forward a bit more, though only a small distance. When Achilles reaches this new position, the tortoise will have moved again. This process repeats infinitely, meaning that Achilles is always catching up to where the tortoise was, but never quite reaching it. Mathematically, the distance Achilles must travel to overtake the tortoise appears to be made up of an infinite number of smaller steps, similar to the dichotomy paradox. If Achilles must complete an infinite number of steps, does that mean he will never actually pass the tortoise? Breaking the paradox down step by step. To visualize the paradox more clearly, let's break it down into a sequence of movements. 1.at the start. The tortoise is 10 meters ahead. 2. When Achilles reaches the tortoise's starting point, the tortoise has moved 1 meter ahead. 3. When Achilles reaches that new point, 10 plus 1 is equal to 11 meters, the tortoise has moved 0.1 meters ahead. 4. When Achilles reaches that new point, 11 plus 0.1 is equal to 11.1 meters, the tortoise has moved 0.01 meters ahead. This pattern continues indefinitely. 10 plus 1 plus 0.1 plus 0.01 plus 0.001 plus. Each time Achilles reaches the previous position of the tortoise has moved slightly further. Since this process seemingly never ends, Zeno concludes that Achilles will never actually overtake the tortoise. The infinite series and its mathematical resolution. At the heart of this paradox is an infinite geometric series, just like in the dichotomy paradox. While it appears that Achilles must complete an infinite number of steps, mathematics provides a way to sum this series and show that Achilles does overtake the tortoise in a finite amount of time. The total distance Achilles must travel can be expressed as an infinite sum. S equals 10 plus 1 plus 0.1 plus 0.01 plus 0.001 plus. This is a geometric series where first term, A, equals 10 meters, the tortoise's head start. Common ratio, R, equals 0.1. Each term is 1/10 of the previous one. The formula to sum an infinite geometric series is S equals A/1R. Plugging in the values. S equals 10/1 to 0.1 equals 10/0.9 is equal to 11.11 meters. Tortoise after running approximately 11.11 meters, which is a finite distance. Thus, the paradox is resolved mathematically. Achilles does overtake the tortoise despite the infinite number of steps. The key insight is that infinite steps do not necessarily require infinite time or distance. As long as each step gets progressively smaller, the total sum remains finite. Why did Zeno consider this a paradox? Zeno formulated his paradoxes to support his mentor Parmenides' belief that motion and change are illusions. The Achilles paradox, like the dichotomy paradox, relies on the assumption that space and time can be infinitely divided. Key assumptions in the paradox. 1. Infinite divisibility of space. The idea that any distance can be divided into infinitely many smaller parts. 2. Infinite divisibility of time. The idea that time is composed of an infinite number of indivisible instants. 3. Step-by-step motion. The assumption that to reach a destination, one must complete each intermediate step in sequence. Since Achilles must complete an infinite number of tasks, reaching each of the tortoise's previous positions, Zeno argues that motion is logically impossible. Our perception of movement is simply an illusion. This reasoning was highly influential in ancient Greek philosophy and remained unresolved until the development of calculus and modern physics. Philosophical implications of the Achilles paradox. Even though mathematics provides a resolution, the paradox raises deeper philosophical and scientific questions. Is space infinitely divisible? The paradox assumes that space can be divided infinitely, meaning there is no smallest unit of distance. However, modern physics suggests that space may not be infinitely divisible. The concept of the Planck length, about 1.6 times 10 minus 351.6 backslash times 10 caret minus 35, 1.6 times 10 minus 35 meters, suggests a fundamental limit to how small distances can get. If space is discrete at this level, then Zeno's argument breaks down. B. Is time infinitely divisible? If time consists of indivisible instants, how does motion occur? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that time, like space, may be quantized, meaning there is a fundamental smallest unit of time. C. The nature of motion. Does movement occur smoothly, or is it composed of a series of tiny jumps? In the quantum world, particles do not travel in smooth trajectories, they jump from one position to another, much like a video game character moving frame by frame. Zeno's paradoxes challenge the continuity of time and space, questions that remain central in modern physics. The role of calculus in modern mathematics. In the 17th century, Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz developed calculus, which introduced the concept of limits. Through calculus, we can describe instantaneous velocity, the idea that motion is not a series of discrete steps but a continuous function over time. By defining motion in terms of derivatives and integrals, calculus provides a framework in which Zeno's paradoxes no longer pose a logical problem. Achilles' velocity remains constant, meaning he doesn't need to complete all infinite steps before overtaking the tortoise. Instead, his speed determines how quickly he closes the gap. The time required for each step shrinks as Achilles gets closer, meaning the infinite sequence converges in a finite period. Thus, Achilles passes the tortoise not only in finite distance but in finite time, proving motion is possible. The Achilles paradox in modern physics. While calculus resolves the paradox mathematically, modern physics offers additional insights. Special relativity. According to Einstein's theory, time and space are not absolute but relative. Achilles and the tortoise experience time differently depending on their motion. Quantum mechanics. At a microscopic scale, motion does not occur as a smooth process but in discrete quantum states. This suggests that space and time might not be continuous, contradicting Zeno's assumption of infinite divisibility. These insights suggest that while Zeno's paradoxes reveal limitations in our classical understanding of motion, they also push us to refine our models of reality. Zeno's Achilles paradox is one of the most famous thought experiments in philosophy and mathematics. While the paradox appears to show that motion is impossible, calculus and modern mathematics demonstrate that Achilles will overtake the tortoise in a finite time and distance. Beyond mathematics, the paradox raises profound questions about the nature of space, time, and motion, questions that continue to shape modern physics and philosophy today. The Fermi paradox, a cosmic mystery. If the universe is teeming with planets capable of supporting life, then where is everyone? One of the fundamental assumptions in astronomy is that Earth is not special. Our planet orbits an ordinary star in an ordinary solar system within an ordinary galaxy. In fact, NASA's Kepler satellite has revealed that there are likely 11 billion Earth-like planets just in our Milky Way. Given these numbers, life should not be rare. More importantly, intelligent life, capable of developing technology, should have emerged many times over. Yet, despite decades of searching, we have found no evidence of extraterrestrial civilizations. No radio signals. No megastructures. No signs of intelligent life. The universe is eerily silent. Advanced civilizations should be detectable. Humanity, for example, has been unintentionally broadcasting radio waves into space for over a century. A sufficiently advanced species would likely do the same, or even more. Given the age of the universe, some alien civilizations could have had millions of years to develop. More intriguingly, if a single civilization mastered interstellar travel, it could theoretically colonize the entire Milky Way in just a few million years, an instant on the cosmic timescale. And yet, there are no signs of galactic empires, no Dyson spheres, no bustling interstellar trade. Physicist Enrico Fermi first raised this question casually over lunch in the 1950s, asking, "Where are they?" Since then, many theories have been proposed to explain this apparent contradiction between high probability and zero evidence. Theories explaining the Fermi paradox. We're alone. One of the most straightforward explanations is that complex life is exceedingly rare. While microbial life might be common across the cosmos, the leap to intelligent, technologically capable civilizations could be extraordinarily improbable. Factors like the specific conditions required for life, planetary stability, and rare evolutionary jumps could mean that Earth is a cosmic anomaly. This idea aligns with the rare Earth hypothesis, which posits that a series of highly unlikely events and conditions led to complex life here. The rare Earth hypothesis emphasizes the unique combination of factors that made Earth hospitable to complex life. The presence of a large moon to stabilize the planet's tilt, a magnetic field to protect against cosmic radiation, plate tectonics to regulate carbon levels, and even the existence of Jupiter-like gas giants to shield inner planets from frequent asteroid impacts. Each of these elements might be rare on its own, and their convergence on Earth could make complex life exceedingly uncommon in the universe. Moreover, the evolution of intelligence requires not just biological complexity but also the right environmental pressures. Evolutionary biologists argue that while simple life may emerge readily, the path to intelligent, tool-using species could be a statistical fluke. On Earth, Homo sapiens appeared only in the last few million years, a brief moment in the planet's 4.5 billion-year history, highlighting how rare and precarious intelligent life might be. The Great Filter. Another compelling theory is the concept of the Great Filter. This hypothesis suggests that there is some critical stage in the evolution of life that is incredibly hard to surpass. It could be the transition from unicellular to multicellular life, the development of intelligence, or even the leap to advanced technology. More alarmingly, the Great Filter might lie ahead of us, implying that civilizations inevitably self-destruct before achieving interstellar travel. Nuclear war, environmental collapse, or runaway artificial intelligence are just a few examples of existential threats that could serve as this filter. The Great Filter raises a haunting question. Is humanity past this barrier, or is it still looming in our future? If the filter lies behind us, perhaps in the improbable emergence of complex life or the development of consciousness, then humanity might be unique in having survived it. However, if the filter is ahead, such as the tendency for advanced civilizations to self-destruct, then our future is precarious. Historical examples highlight how fragile civilizations can be. The threat of nuclear annihilation during the Cold War, current concerns about climate change, and the unpredictable rise of artificial intelligence all present existential risks. The Great Filter theory suggests that these challenges might be common stumbling blocks for intelligent civilizations, explaining why we see no evidence of their survival. They're hiding, the zoo hypothesis and beyond. One of the most intriguing and speculative answers to the Fermi paradox is the idea that intelligent extraterrestrial civilizations are aware of humanity but choose to avoid contact. This concept is commonly known as the zoo hypothesis, first proposed by MIT scientist John A. Ball in 1973. According to this theory, Earth and humanity are being deliberately shielded from interaction, much like zookeepers avoid direct interference with the animals they observe. The zoo hypothesis explained. In this scenario, advanced alien civilizations could be monitoring Earth from afar, possibly even placing the solar system under some form of quarantine. Their intention might be to allow humanity to evolve naturally without external influence. Just as humans observe wildlife without direct interaction to avoid disturbing natural behaviors, extraterrestrials could be applying a similar principle. They might be waiting for humanity to reach a certain technological, ethical, or social maturity before making contact. This threshold could involve mastering interstellar travel, unifying as a species, or eliminating internal conflicts like war and poverty. Motivations behind hiding. Ethical concerns. Advanced civilizations could follow a cosmic version of the Prime Directive from Star Trek, a non-interference policy designed to prevent less advanced species from cultural contamination. Self-preservation. Revealing their existence might expose them to potential threats. Even if humanity seems primitive now, there's no telling how quickly a species might advance. By remaining hidden, they ensure their own safety. Observation purposes. Humanity could be part of a grand experiment, with extraterrestrials studying human development, sociology, and evolution. This would imply that they view us as an object of scientific curiosity rather than as equals. 3. Technological concealment. A civilization far ahead of us in technology would likely have methods to remain invisible. They could use cloaking technologies or manipulate signals to avoid detection. It's even possible they reside in regions of the electromagnetic spectrum we haven't explored or beyond the 3 spatial dimensions we perceive. The concept of dark forest theory from Liu Cixin's 3-body problem series presents a darker take on this idea. It suggests that civilizations hide because the universe is a dangerous place, where any species revealing its location risks annihilation by others viewing them as potential threats. 4. Implications for humanity. If the zoo hypothesis holds true, it forces us to consider what level of development would make us worthy of contact. Would it require technological advancement, ethical growth, or a combination of both? It also introduces the unsettling notion that we are being watched, possibly even manipulated, without any awareness, leading to profound philosophical and ethical questions about free will and autonomy. They're unrecognizable. Another compelling explanation for the Fermi paradox is that alien life exists, but it's so fundamentally different from our expectations that we simply fail to recognize it. This theory challenges our anthropocentric views of life and intelligence, suggesting that our search methods are too narrow and limited by our own biological and technological frameworks. Alternative biochemistries. Earth-based life is carbon-based, relying on water as a solvent and DNA for genetic information. But what if alien life forms use entirely different chemical building blocks? Some scientists speculate about silicon-based life since silicon, like carbon, can form complex molecules. Others propose life forms based on ammonia, methane, or even exotic materials not yet discovered. Extremophiles on Earth. Organisms thriving in extreme conditions such as deep-sea hydrothermal vents or acidic lakes demonstrate that life can adapt to hostile environments. This suggests that alien life might exist in conditions we deem inhospitable, such as on gas giants or in the dense atmospheres of planets like Venus. Non-biological life forms. Advanced civilizations might transition from biological to post-biological forms, uploading consciousness into machines or developing AI-based entities. These beings wouldn't require oxygen, water, or other life-sustaining resources we associate with biology. There's also speculation about energy-based life forms existing as plasma clouds or electromagnetic patterns. Such entities could communicate and operate on wavelengths completely foreign to human technology, making them virtually undetectable. Communication barriers. Our attempts to contact alien civilizations are mostly focused on radio waves, but what if advanced species use more sophisticated communication methods? They might employ quantum entanglement, neutrino beams, or even gravitational waves to send messages, all of which lie beyond our current capabilities. Furthermore, communication might not be intentional. Instead of sending signals, alien civilizations could leave technosignatures, like megastructures e.g. Dyson spheres, or environmental changes e.g. atmospheric pollutants. Yet even these signs could be so advanced that we fail to recognize them for what they are. Consciousness and perception. One of the more speculative ideas is that alien life might exist on a plane of existence beyond our comprehension, perhaps in different dimensions or as forms of pure consciousness. If so, they wouldn't interact with the universe in ways we can detect. Even more mind-bending is the notion that alien life could be right here on Earth, but existing in forms imperceptible to human senses, similar to how certain wavelengths of light or sound are beyond human detection. Cosmic timing. While the universe is nearly 14 billion years old, the rise and fall of civilizations might be fleeting in cosmic terms. The cosmic timing theory suggests that intelligent life does exist but hasn't overlapped with humanity in time, making contact nearly impossible. Civilizations as fleeting moments. If civilizations rise, flourish, and fall over relatively short periods in cosmic terms, the odds of two technologically advanced societies existing simultaneously are low. Consider Earth. Modern humans have been around for about 300,000 years, but we've only had radio technology for a little over a century. If civilizations have similar windows of detectability, they might blink in and out of existence without ever aligning with others. The firstborn hypothesis. Another possibility is that humanity is among the first intelligent species to emerge in the universe. This idea, known as the firstborn hypothesis, suggests that the conditions required for life have only recently become favorable on a cosmic scale. This aligns with the idea of the anthropic principle, which posits that we exist in a universe fine-tuned to support observers like ourselves. Perhaps intelligent life is still rare because the universe is only now reaching the sweet spot for life to flourish. The extinction wave theory. It's possible that life forms often emerge but are wiped out before achieving interstellar capabilities. Cosmic events like gamma-ray bursts, supernovae, or massive asteroid impacts could reset the evolutionary clock on countless planets. Civilizations might also self-destruct due to nuclear war, environmental collapse, or uncontrolled artificial intelligence, a variant of the Great Filter hypothesis, suggesting that the lifespan of intelligent civilizations is self-limiting. Finally, it's possible that intelligent civilizations will emerge in the future, and humanity is simply early to the cosmic party. As the universe continues to evolve, more Earth-like planets may develop complex life, increasing the chances of future contact. The dark forest hypothesis. One of the most chilling and thought-provoking explanations for the Fermi paradox is the dark forest hypothesis, introduced by Chinese author Liu Cixin in his science fiction novel The Three-Body Problem. This theory offers a dark view of cosmic relations, suggesting that the reason we haven't heard from alien civilizations is because they are all deliberately remaining silent out of fear. The dark forest hypothesis imagines the universe as a vast, dark forest where every civilization is a silent hunter, lurking in the shadows, wary of revealing its position. Each civilization is both a potential threat and a potential target. Since it's impossible to know the intentions of unknown civilizations, and given the risk of annihilation, every species chooses to stay quiet, much like a hunter avoiding making any noise that could give away their location. The logic behind this idea rests on two key principles. First, survival is the primary goal of every civilization. Second, resources in the universe are finite, leading to inevitable competition. Because of these principles, civilizations can't afford to assume that others are friendly. The safest strategy is to remain hidden and, if necessary, strike first if another civilization is detected, a preemptive attack to ensure survival. The fear stems from the problem of uncertainty. In the vastness of space, it's impossible to gauge the intentions of a distant civilization. Even if an alien society appears peaceful now, there's no guarantee it will remain so in the future. Over long cosmic timescales, civilizations could evolve in unpredictable ways, potentially becoming aggressive. There's also the problem of asymmetry. If two civilizations meet and one is technologically superior, The weaker one is at risk of being wiped out, exploited, or subjugated. This power imbalance further motivates secrecy and caution. Additionally, the hypothesis suggests a first-strike advantage. In a universe governed by survival instincts, striking first could be the difference between continued existence and total destruction. This creates a cosmic version of a prisoner's dilemma, where mutual trust is nearly impossible. The implications for humanity are sobering. According to the dark forest hypothesis, humanity's current behavior, broadcasting radio signals, sending probes into deep space, and actively seeking contact, could be incredibly risky. By announcing our presence to the universe, we might inadvertently draw the attention of a hostile civilization. The hypothesis also raises the unsettling possibility that other civilizations may have been detected and subsequently destroyed in the past, leaving the universe eerily silent as a result of cosmic preemptive strikes. Despite its dark logic, the hypothesis has its critics. Some argue that it assumes all civilizations are inherently aggressive or fearful, ignoring the possibility of cooperative, peaceful species. Others suggest that advanced civilizations might have transcended survival-based motives, developing ethical frameworks that prioritize coexistence and understanding. Still, the unsettling logic of the dark forest remains a powerful and plausible explanation for the Great Silence. The simulation hypothesis. The simulation hypothesis offers a radically different perspective on the Fermi paradox, suggesting that the reason we haven't detected extraterrestrial life is because it's simply not programmed into our reality. This theory proposes that our universe is an artificial simulation, much like an advanced version of a video game or virtual reality system. The concept was first popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. He proposed that a highly advanced civilization could create simulated universes, complete with conscious beings, for purposes such as research, entertainment, or even as historical recreations. If such simulations are possible and if civilizations tend to create many of them, then statistically, it's more likely that we're living in a simulation than in the real base reality. Applying this hypothesis to the Fermi paradox, it's possible that extraterrestrial life hasn't been programmed into the simulation we inhabit. Just as a video game might focus on a single character or environment, our simulated universe could be intentionally devoid of alien civilizations. The simulation might also be designed to study humanity's development in isolation, to observe how we evolve socially, technologically, and philosophically when we believe we're alone in the universe. Another angle suggests that simulating an entire universe down to the atomic level would require enormous computational resources. To optimize efficiency, the simulation might only render areas directly observed by conscious beings. This means that the vastness of the universe might exist in only a superficial or incomplete state, with no need to include complex alien life unless someone is actively looking for it. The philosophical implications of the simulation hypothesis are profound. If true, it challenges our understanding of reality, free will, and consciousness. Are we merely self-aware programs? Do we genuinely have autonomy, or are our thoughts and actions the result of coded instructions? If we are inside a simulation, the search for extraterrestrial life might be entirely futile, as it was never intended to exist within the framework of our reality. However, the hypothesis has significant limitations. Despite its philosophical intrigue, it lacks empirical evidence. There's currently no definitive way to prove or disprove that we're living in a simulation. Critics argue that even if future civilizations could run such simulations, it doesn't necessarily mean they would, or that consciousness could be simulated at all. Technological limitations. A more grounded and pragmatic explanation for the Fermi paradox is that our current technology is simply too primitive to detect extraterrestrial life. The universe is vast, complex, and filled with phenomena that could easily obscure or mask the faint signatures of alien civilizations. The immense scale of the universe is one of the most significant obstacles. The Milky Way galaxy alone spans about 100,000 light-years, and our radio signals have only traveled about 100 light-years from Earth, a tiny fraction of our galaxy. Even if a nearby civilization were transmitting signals, those signals might take thousands or millions of years to reach us, and our signals would take just as long to reach them. Another factor is the potential weakness or absence of detectable signals. Our search for extraterrestrial intelligence, primarily through projects like SETI, has focused on specific radio frequencies, particularly the water hole, a relatively quiet band in the radio spectrum. But alien civilizations might not use radio waves at all or might transmit signals so weak or diffuse that they blend into the cosmic background noise. It's also possible that advanced civilizations use communication methods far beyond our understanding, such as quantum communication or neutrino beams, which our current technology cannot detect. Our instruments also have limitations. Even the most advanced radio telescopes and space observatories can only scan a small portion of the sky at any given time and can only focus on certain frequencies or wavelengths. Despite the efforts of projects like Breakthrough Listen, which has expanded our search capabilities, our exploration of the cosmos remains incredibly narrow. In many ways, our attempts to find alien life are like searching for a single grain of sand on an entire beach. Another issue is the anthropocentric bias in our search. We often assume that alien life will resemble life on Earth, leading us to focus on Earth-like planets and familiar biosignatures. But life elsewhere could be based on entirely different biochemistries, such as silicon instead of carbon, or might exist in forms beyond our comprehension. Similarly, we primarily search for technosignatures, evidence of advanced technology like radio waves or megastructures. But alien civilizations might not produce these detectable artifacts or might use technologies that leave no trace we can recognize. Timing also plays a crucial role. The concept of temporal mismatch suggests that even if alien civilizations exist, we might not be listening at the right time. Civilizations might only be detectable for a brief period during their technological development, perhaps a few hundred or thousand years, before they either advance to undetectable forms of communication or collapse entirely. The odds of two civilizations existing within the same detection window and being close enough to communicate are incredibly slim. The implications of the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox forces us to reconsider our place in the universe. Are we a lonely accident or just one of many civilizations yet to make contact? The implications of either answer are profound. If we are alone, it places an immense responsibility on humanity to preserve and protect life. We could be the universe's only chance at self-awareness and understanding. Conversely, if other civilizations exist but remain hidden or extinct, it serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of intelligent life. The Great Filter could be an ominous warning about our future. Until we find definitive evidence, the Fermi paradox remains one of the most profound questions in science and philosophy. It challenges our assumptions, pushes the boundaries of our understanding, and ignites our curiosity about what lies beyond our tiny blue planet. In the vastness of the cosmos, we continue to look up at the stars and wonder. Zeno's arrow paradox, the timeless question of motion and reality. Throughout history, philosophers have challenged our understanding of reality with puzzles that, on the surface, seem simple but reveal deep complexities about the world. One of the most famous of these is Zeno's arrow paradox, an ancient thought experiment that questions the very nature of motion and time. First proposed by Zeno of Elea in the 5th century BCE, this paradox continues to puzzle philosophers, mathematicians, and physicists alike, forcing us to reconsider what it truly means for something to move. Zeno's arrow paradox is deceptively straightforward. If, at any single instant, a moving object is indistinguishable from a non-moving one, how can motion be real? Imagine an arrow flying through the air. If we were to take a perfect snapshot of the arrow at any exact moment in time, the image would show it frozen in place. Since time does not pass in a single instant, the arrow does not move during that moment. But if the arrow is motionless at every instant along its flight, how does it ever reach its target? This unsettling conclusion, that motion is impossible, contradicts our everyday experiences. We clearly see motion happening around us. Arrows reach their targets, cars drive down streets, and athletes run races. Yet Zeno's paradox forces us to confront a deeper question. Is our perception of motion an illusion? The core of Zeno's argument. At the heart of Zeno's paradox lies a fundamental assumption. Time is composed of individual, separate instants, like discrete frames in a film reel. In this view, motion is a series of static positions, captured frame by frame. Since an object is at rest in each individual frame, and there is no in-between during a single instant, motion appears logically impossible. Zeno used this argument to challenge the Pythagorean belief that reality could be fully understood through numbers and discrete units. If time and space are divisible into infinite, indivisible parts, then how do we account for continuous motion? If an arrow is at rest in every moment, how can those moments combine to create the smooth motion we see? This logical puzzle is a part of Zeno's larger body of paradoxes aimed at defending his mentor Parmenides, who argued that change and motion are illusions. For Parmenides, the universe was a single, unchanging, eternal entity, and Zeno's paradoxes served as arguments to support that radical view. Early responses: the nature of time and motion. Zeno's paradox sparked philosophical debates that continued for centuries. One of the earliest responses came from Aristotle, who rejected the idea that time is composed of static instants. In his work Physics, Aristotle argued that time and motion are continuous, not discrete. According to him, an instant is not a part of time but rather a boundary or a marker, similar to how a point marks the end of a line segment but has no length itself. In Aristotle's view, motion happens continuously over time, and it doesn't make sense to analyze it by focusing on isolated moments. This approach helped dissolve the paradox philosophically but did not provide a mathematical framework to fully resolve the logical issues Zeno raised. It wasn't until the development of calculus over 2 millennia later that a rigorous solution emerged. The calculus solution: continuous change and instantaneous velocity. Zeno's arrow paradox hinges on the idea that motion is impossible if, at every individual instant, an object is stationary. For centuries, this argument presented a serious challenge because it seemed logically sound. If an arrow is not moving in any specific instant, how can it move at all? This puzzle remained unresolved until the 17th century, when the invention of calculus by Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz revolutionized how we understand motion, change, and time. Calculus introduced the concept of limits, which allowed mathematicians to describe how quantities change not only over intervals but also at precise moments. This was a groundbreaking shift in thinking because it provided a way to quantify and understand instantaneous change, something that had eluded mathematicians and philosophers since Zeno's time. At the core of this advancement is the concept of instantaneous velocity. Before calculus, motion was often described using average velocity, the total distance traveled divided by the total time taken. For example, if an arrow travels 100 meters in 10 seconds, its average speed is simply 10 meters per second. However, this measurement gives no information about how fast the arrow was moving at any specific moment during its flight. Was it speeding up? Slowing down? Staying constant? Without a method to examine the arrow's speed at a specific instant, Zeno's paradox still loomed. Calculus solved this problem elegantly. By using limits, Newton and Leibniz showed that you could analyze the arrow's position over increasingly smaller intervals of time, fractions of a second approaching zero. As these intervals shrink, the ratio of distance to time approaches a specific value, which defines the arrow's instantaneous velocity at a single moment. Even though the arrow appears frozen at that instant, calculus reveals that it still possesses a measurable rate of change in position, which we interpret as motion. To visualize this, imagine zooming in on a curve that represents the arrow's position over time on a graph. As you focus on smaller and smaller segments around a specific point, say at 3.5 seconds into the arrow's flight, the curve begins to straighten out. Eventually, it resembles a straight line, and the slope of this line represents the arrow's instantaneous velocity at that exact moment. This slope tells us how fast and in what direction the arrow is moving, despite the paradoxical idea that it seems stationary in a single frozen instant. This mathematical framework dissolves Zeno's paradox by demonstrating that motion does not require an object to move within an indivisible instant. Instead, motion is a continuous process composed of an infinite number of infinitesimally small changes. Each individual moment may capture the arrow at a fixed position, but the collective sequence of these moments, connected by continuous change, creates smooth and uninterrupted motion. In this sense, calculus shows that Zeno's paradox is based on a misunderstanding of how motion works. The flaw lies in treating time and motion as a collection of static snapshots rather than as a dynamic continuum. By introducing the concept of limits and infinitesimals, calculus bridges the gap between these static instants and the flowing nature of motion that we observe in reality. However, while calculus provides a robust mathematical solution, Zeno's paradox still challenges our philosophical understanding of time and space. It forces us to ask deeper questions. Are time and space truly continuous, as calculus models suggest, or are they made up of discrete units that we have yet to perceive? Could there be a fundamental graininess to the fabric of reality, as some modern physical theories propose? This lingering uncertainty keeps Zeno's paradox relevant even today. Calculus may resolve the logical contradiction, but it also opens the door to new mysteries about the true nature of motion, time, and the universe itself. Modern physics and Zeno's paradox. As physics advanced, especially in the 20th century, Zeno's paradox took on new significance in light of relativity and quantum mechanics. These revolutionary theories forced scientists to reconsider the nature of time and space, relativity and the relativity of motion. Albert Einstein's theory of special relativity introduced the idea that time and space are not absolute but relative, depending on the observer's frame of reference. In this view, an object's motion is not universal but depends on the observer's perspective. For instance, an arrow flying through the air appears to move to a stationary observer, but to someone moving alongside the arrow at the same speed, it appears motionless. Physicist Kevin Brown, in Reflections on Relativity, highlights how special relativity changes the way we think about Zeno's paradox. In Einstein's universe, time and space are part of a four-dimensional continuum called spacetime, where motion is simply the tracing of an object's path, or world line, through this continuum. From this perspective, the arrow's motion is not a series of static snapshots but a continuous trajectory through spacetime. The paradoxical freeze-frame view Zeno describes doesn't capture the full reality because time itself is part of the dynamic system. Relativity also introduces the concept of time dilation, the idea that time passes at different rates depending on an object's speed and gravitational field. Moving objects experience time differently than stationary ones, further complicating the seemingly simple notion of motion. Quantum mechanics, discrete time and space? While relativity views spacetime as a smooth continuum, quantum mechanics suggests that the universe might be fundamentally discrete at the smallest scales. Quantum theory introduces the concept of quantization, where certain physical quantities like energy come in indivisible units called quanta. This idea leads to intriguing questions about Zeno's paradox. Could time and space themselves be quantized? Some theories in modern physics, such as loop quantum gravity, propose that space and time are composed of tiny, discrete units, like the pixels on a screen, rather than being continuous. If time advances in discrete ticks, as some quantum theories suggest, Zeno's paradox gains new relevance. Motion would occur as a series of jumps from one position to another, rather than as smooth movement. But this raises another question. What happens between those ticks? Is there a true gap in time, or is the progression seamless in a way we can't perceive? Furthermore, in quantum mechanics, particles like electrons don't follow continuous paths. Instead, they exist in a state of probability, only taking on definite positions when observed. This strange behavior echoes the paradox's challenge to our understanding of motion and highlights how Zeno's ancient puzzle anticipates modern questions in physics. Philosophical implications. What is time? Beyond the scientific solutions, Zeno's arrow paradox forces us to grapple with deeper philosophical questions about time, motion, and reality. What is time really? Is it a flowing river carrying us forward continuously, or is it a series of discrete moments, like beads on a string? Philosophers have debated these views for centuries. The two main perspectives are 1. Presentism. Only the present moment is real. The past is gone and the future doesn't yet exist. In this view, Zeno's paradox raises serious challenges because motion must occur entirely within the present moment, which Zeno argues is impossible. 2. Eternalism. All moments in time, past, present, and future, exist equally. Time is like a block and we simply experience it sequentially. This view aligns more with relativity's space-time continuum and offers a way around Zeno's paradox, suggesting that motion is the tracing of an object's path through this four-dimensional block. Zeno's paradox also touches on the nature of consciousness and perception. We perceive time as flowing smoothly, but could that be an illusion? Just as a movie appears continuous even though it's made of discrete frames, perhaps our experience of motion and time is a construction of our minds. Zeno's arrow paradox today, a timeless puzzle. More than 2,500 years after Zeno first proposed his arrow paradox, it continues to captivate philosophers, mathematicians, and physicists alike. Despite the advancements in mathematics, particularly with the invention of calculus and groundbreaking developments in modern physics, the paradox still raises deep questions about the nature of time, motion, and reality. Far from being a mere historical curiosity, Zeno's arrow paradox serves as a lens through which we examine some of the most profound mysteries of the cosmos. At its core, the paradox asks us to reconsider what we take for granted, our experience of motion. We see objects moving every day, arrows fly through the air, cars speed down highways, and rivers flow endlessly to the sea. Yet, when dissected through Zeno's logic, even this simple phenomenon becomes puzzling. How can an arrow, frozen in every single instant of time, cover any distance at all? The paradox forces us to examine the fundamental nature of time and space, leading us to questions that still baffle scientists and philosophers. Is time continuous or discrete? One of the most enduring questions posed by the arrow paradox is whether time flows as a continuous stream or if it advances in discrete, indivisible steps. Calculus, with its reliance on limits and infinitesimals, models time as continuous, allowing us to compute instantaneous velocities and resolve Zeno's paradox mathematically. However, modern physics has introduced complexities that challenge this smooth picture. In quantum mechanics, the idea of discrete quantities, such as energy levels, suggests that, at the smallest scales, reality might not be continuous. The concept of Planck time, approximately 5.39 times 10⁻⁴45.39 times 10 caret minus 44, 5.39 times 10⁻⁴ seconds, represents the smallest meaningful unit of time according to current theories. If time is indeed quantized at such a scale, then Zeno's question takes on new significance. Perhaps motion doesn't occur in a continuous flow but rather in a sequence of discrete ticks, much like frames in a film. Conversely, general relativity treats time as a smooth dimension interwoven with space, forming the fabric of spacetime. In this framework, objects follow continuous paths, and the paradox dissolves under the mathematics of smooth curves and velocities. The tension between these two views, continuous time in relativity and discrete time in quantum mechanics, remains one of the central puzzles in modern physics, particularly in the search for a unified theory of quantum gravity. Is motion fundamental or an illusion? Zeno's paradox also challenges us to question whether motion is a real, fundamental aspect of the universe or merely a perceptual illusion. In the realm of quantum mechanics, the idea that reality might not be as solid as it appears gains traction. Particles don't have definite positions or velocities until measured. Instead, they exist as probabilities in a wave function. At this microscopic scale, the concept of an arrow following a continuous path through space becomes fuzzy. Furthermore, some philosophical interpretations, like relationalism, suggest that motion is not an inherent property of objects but rather a relationship between them. In this view, the arrow's motion is not something it possesses independently but is defined only in relation to its surroundings, its target, the air it moves through, and the observer watching it. Another intriguing perspective comes from the concept of block universe theory in physics, which posits that past, present, and future all coexist in a four-dimensional spacetime continuum. From this viewpoint, the arrow's entire flight path is already laid out in spacetime, and the sense of motion we experience is merely our consciousness moving through this block. In such a model, motion is not something that happens but something that is, raising philosophical questions about the nature of time and free will. Can mathematics fully capture reality? The arrow paradox also invites us to question the limits of mathematics in describing the universe. Calculus offers a precise mathematical resolution, but does that mean the paradox is fully solved, or has it simply been rephrased in mathematical language? This leads to deeper philosophical debates about the nature of mathematics itself. Platonists argue that mathematical truths exist independently of human minds and that the universe follows these pre-existing laws. In this view, calculus reveals a deeper reality that resolves Zeno's paradox. However, formalists and intuitionists see mathematics as a human invention, a language we created to describe observations but not necessarily the ultimate fabric of reality. If mathematics is merely a tool, then perhaps Zeno's paradox points to limitations in how we conceptualize motion, time, and space. Moreover, the paradox raises the issue of infinite divisibility, a cornerstone of calculus. While the mathematical tools can handle infinite processes through limits, whether the physical universe operates this way remains an open question. Can space and time truly be divided infinitely, or is there a smallest possible unit beyond which division is meaningless? Concepts like quantum foam suggest that at the smallest scales, space-time may become turbulent and discontinuous, challenging the assumptions that underlie our mathematical models. The paradox as a philosophical and scientific catalyst. Zeno's arrow paradox serves not just as a logical puzzle but as a catalyst for deeper inquiry. It compels us to reflect on the limitations of our perceptions and the frameworks we use to understand the world. Even though we have mathematical tools to describe motion, the underlying questions about the nature of time, space, and existence remain profoundly complex. The paradox has also influenced modern debates about the nature of consciousness and observation. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation plays a crucial role in determining the state of a system. Could it be that our perception of motion is similarly a construct, something that only exists because we observe it? Philosophers and scientists continue to explore these intersections, blurring the lines between physics, metaphysics, and epistemology. A timeless reflection on reality. Ultimately, Zeno's arrow paradox reminds us that even the most mundane aspects of our daily lives, like watching an arrow fly, are deeply mysterious when examined closely. It challenges us to reconsider what we believe to be obvious and to recognize that beneath the surface of simple experiences lie profound and unresolved questions. As physics pushes the boundaries of knowledge with concepts like string theory, loop quantum gravity, and explorations into the nature of spacetime, Zeno's ancient puzzle remains a relevant and potent symbol of humanity's quest for understanding. It stands as a testament to the enduring power of philosophical inquiry, bridging the ancient and modern worlds in a shared pursuit of truth. Even today, as we watch an arrow cut through the air or observe the seemingly seamless flow of time, Zeno's question echoes through the ages. Is motion real, or is it an illusion woven by the very fabric of time itself? Zeno's paradox of the moving rose, the stadium. Zeno's paradox of the moving rose, commonly known as the stadium paradox, presents a contradiction regarding relative motion and time measurement. According to Aristotle's account in Physics, Book 6, Chapter 9, Zeno describes a scenario in which two sets of moving objects appear to pass each other at a rate that conflicts with the expected passage of time. The paradox is structured as follows. Three sets of objects, all of equal length, are placed along three parallel tracks within a stadium. The A bodies are stationary and serve as a reference frame. The B bodies are moving to the right at a uniform speed. The C bodies are moving to the left at the same uniform speed as the B bodies. At an initial moment, the B and C bodies are aligned in such a way that each B and C body is adjacent to both the stationary A bodies and one another. Then, in a short interval of time, the B bodies shift right while the C bodies shift left. Zeno's paradox arises from the following observation. During this time interval, a moving C body passes two B bodies but only one A body. If motion were occurring in indivisible, discrete units of time and space, this result would seem contradictory. Since the B bodies and C bodies are moving at the same speed but in opposite directions, it would be expected that a C body should take twice as long to pass two B bodies as it takes to pass one stationary A body. However, the paradox suggests otherwise. Breaking down the paradox. Zeno's stadium paradox relies on a fundamental contradiction in the way motion is perceived when objects move relative to each other. The paradox challenges the consistency of motion in a system where multiple objects move in opposite directions at equal speeds. To fully understand the problem, we need to examine Zeno's reasoning and how it leads to an apparent contradiction. Zeno's two core assumptions. 1. Motion occurs in discrete steps. Zeno's paradox is based on the idea that motion is not continuous but instead occurs in small, indivisible increments. This means that objects do not move smoothly but instead jump from one position to another in finite steps. Under this assumption, both space and time are composed of the smallest possible units, like pixels on a screen or individual frames in a video. 2. The passage of one moving object relative to another should follow a fixed time rule. The second assumption is that the time required for one object to pass another should be proportional to the relative speeds and initial positions of the objects. If one object is moving past another, the expected time of passage should be determined by their speeds and distances. This means that passing two objects should take twice as long as passing one, assuming uniform motion. These two assumptions, when applied to the stadium scenario, lead to a contradiction. The motion of the B and C bodies. Zeno's paradox sets up a scenario where the B bodies are moving right, the C bodies are moving left at the same speed, and the A bodies remain stationary. This creates three different frames of reference from which we can analyze motion. 1. The perspective of the stationary A bodies. From the A body's point of view, a moving C body takes a certain amount of time to pass. This duration makes sense and does not appear to create any contradiction. 2. The perspective of the moving B bodies. When viewed from the B bodies, the C bodies appear to move at twice the speed since they are moving in the opposite direction at an equal velocity. 3. The perspective of the moving C bodies. Likewise, the B bodies appear to move at twice the speed relative to a C body. Here is where the paradox emerges. The C bodies move past two B bodies in the same amount of time it takes them to pass one A body. If movement is discrete, then the C body should take twice as long to pass two B bodies as it does to pass one A body. However, in the scenario presented, the C body passes two B bodies within the same time frame that it takes to pass only one A body. The contradiction within discrete space and time. If space and time were composed of indivisible units, this result should not be possible. In a discrete world, a C body moving past two B bodies should take twice as many steps as it would take to pass one A body. The fact that it does not suggests a logical inconsistency in treating space and time as discrete. To visualize the problem, imagine time as a series of distinct snapshots. At t=0, the C body is aligned with a B body and an A body. At t=1, the C body has moved one unit left, passing a second B body but only one A body. At t=2, the C body moves another unit, now passing yet another B body but still only one A body. The question arises, how can a C body move past two B bodies in the same number of time steps it takes to pass one A body? This seems to contradict the assumption that movement occurs in discrete steps, where each movement should be counted as an indivisible event. This contradiction suggests that motion cannot be fully explained by a discrete framework of space and time. If motion were truly discrete, then the number of steps required to pass two objects should always be twice the number of steps required to pass one object. However, the stadium paradox demonstrates that this is not the case when objects move relative to each other at equal speeds in opposite directions. Implications of the contradiction. Zeno's paradox, when interpreted in this way, challenges the idea that motion can be broken down into discrete, indivisible steps. If space and time were composed of indivisible units, then the paradox should hold. Since we do not observe such contradictions in real-world motion, this suggests that either 1. Space and time are not discrete but continuous, meaning that motion occurs in infinitely small increments rather than distinct jumps. 2. Relative motion must be considered differently, which is what Aristotle and later philosophers argued. The paradox raises deep questions about how motion is measured and whether space and time are fundamentally quantized or continuous. While Aristotle resolved the paradox by introducing the concept of relative velocity, modern physics uses calculus and continuous spacetime models to explain why such contradictions do not actually occur in reality. Aristotle's response to the paradox. Aristotle carefully analyzed Zeno's stadium paradox and argued that its apparent contradiction arises from a misunderstanding of relative motion. His response was based on the idea that motion should not be measured in absolute terms but rather in relation to the objects involved. He identified a flaw in Zeno's reasoning, the assumption that all relative motions must be measured in the same way, regardless of whether the objects are stationary or in motion. Motion is relative, not absolute. Aristotle pointed out that the key to resolving the paradox lies in understanding how objects move relative to one another. He observed that when two objects are moving toward each other, they pass each other more quickly than if one were stationary. This means that the time required for one object to pass another is not fixed. It depends on their relative velocities. Applying this reasoning to Zeno's stadium, Aristotle explained why a c body passes two b bodies in the same time it takes to pass one stationary a body. Since the b and c bodies are moving in opposite directions at equal speeds, their relative velocity is twice the speed of either body. This means that from the perspective of a c body, a b body moves twice as fast as a stationary a body. Therefore, the c body can pass two b bodies in the same time that it passes one a body. Zeno's paradox assumes that the time required for one body to pass another should always be the same, regardless of whether the other body is stationary or moving. Aristotle rejected this assumption, demonstrating that the paradox arises not from an actual contradiction in motion but from an incorrect way of measuring motion. Breaking down Aristotle's explanation with an example. To better understand Aristotle's response, let's consider a simple example. Imagine two runners on a track. Runner A is standing still. Runner B is running at a speed of 5 meters per second to the right. Runner C is running at a speed of 5 meters per second to the left. Now let's compare two cases. 1. If runner C runs past the stationary runner A, it will take a certain amount of time to pass. Let's say runner C is 2 meters long. At 5 meters per second, it will take 0.4 seconds to completely pass runner A. 2. If runner C runs past runner B, who is moving in the opposite direction at the same speed, the relative speed between them is now 10 meters per second, 5 meters per second plus 5 meters per second. At this new speed, runner C will take only 0.2 seconds to pass runner B. This confirms Aristotle's argument. When two objects move toward each other at equal speeds, they pass each other in half the time compared to passing a stationary object. Implications of Aristotle's argument. Aristotle's response effectively dissolves the paradox by shifting the focus from absolute motion to relative motion. His explanation introduces an important principle that is still fundamental in physics today. 1. Motion must always be measured relative to a frame of reference. Zeno's paradox mistakenly assumes that the time required to pass an object is the same regardless of whether the object is moving or stationary. Aristotle showed that this is incorrect. Relative motion must be considered. 2. Objects moving toward each other pass each other faster than they pass stationary objects. The C and B bodies in Zeno's paradox are moving in opposite directions at equal speeds. Their relative velocity is twice as fast as either moving relative to the stationary A bodies. This explains why a C body passes two B bodies in the same time that it takes to pass one A body. 3. Zeno's paradox does not disprove motion. While Zeno sought to challenge the coherence of motion, Aristotle demonstrated that the paradox is based on a flawed assumption rather than an actual contradiction in nature. By resolving the paradox in this way, Aristotle reinforced the idea that motion is a real and measurable phenomenon, countering Zeno's broader argument that motion is an illusion. Aristotle's influence on later thought. Aristotle's analysis of motion laid the groundwork for future developments in physics. His insights into relative motion anticipated later work by Galileo and Newton, who formalized these ideas using mathematical equations. Galileo, 1564–1642, refined Aristotle's ideas by introducing the concept of inertial reference frames, where motion is always relative to a chosen point of observation. Newton, 1643–1727, built upon this with his laws of motion, which quantitatively described how objects interact when moving relative to one another. Though Aristotle's explanations lacked the precise mathematical formulation of later scientists, his fundamental insight, that motion depends on relative speed, remains valid in modern physics. Modern interpretation and resolution of Zeno's stadium paradox. Advances in mathematics and physics, particularly in the fields of calculus and relativity, provide a resolution to Zeno's stadium paradox. The core issue in the paradox stems from an assumption that space and time are discrete, meaning they consist of indivisible units. However, modern science treats space and time as continuous, which allows for smooth and predictable motion. By reconsidering the nature of space, time, and relative motion, contemporary physics explains why the paradox is not actually a contradiction. 1. Relative motion resolves the paradox. The most direct resolution comes from understanding relative motion, a concept well established in classical mechanics. In Zeno's stadium scenario, there are three sets of objects: A bodies, which are stationary; B bodies, which move to the right at a certain speed; C bodies, which move to the left at the same speed as the B bodies. The paradox arises because a C body passes two B bodies in the same time it takes to pass one stationary A body. This seems contradictory under the assumption that motion occurs in fixed steps. However, in modern physics, we recognize that when two objects move toward each other, their relative velocity is the sum of their individual speeds. For example, if the B and C bodies each move at a speed of 5 meters per second, their relative velocity is relative equals VB plus VC equals 5 plus 5 is equal to 10m/s. This means that from the perspective of a C body, a B body moves at twice the speed that a stationary A body appears to move. As a result, a C body can pass two B bodies in the same time it takes to pass one A body, which resolves the apparent contradiction. 2. The continuity of space and time. Zeno's paradox assumes that space and time consist of indivisible units, meaning motion occurs in a sequence of jumps rather than as a smooth progression. This assumption leads to problems when analyzing how objects move relative to one another. Modern physics, however, models space and time as continuous, meaning there are infinitely many points between any two given points in space or moments in time. This is mathematically described using calculus, which allows us to analyze motion with infinite precision. In this framework, an object's motion is not a sequence of discrete jumps but a smooth and uninterrupted transition. With this understanding, there is no contradiction in a C body passing two B bodies in the same time that it takes to pass one A body. The motion of each object follows predictable rules, governed by differential equations, which describe how velocity and acceleration change over time. 3. Zeno's challenge to the idea of discrete motion. Some scholars argue that Zeno's paradoxes were intended as arguments against the idea that space and time are composed of indivisible units. If motion were truly discrete, then objects would have to jump from one position to another rather than moving continuously. This would create the contradiction that Zeno describes. A C body would somehow have to pass two B bodies in the time it takes to pass one A body, which seems impossible under a discrete framework. However, the fact that we do not observe such contradictions in real-world motion suggests that space and time are not fundamentally discrete. Instead, the laws of physics describe motion as a continuous process, meaning that Zeno's paradox is based on a flawed assumption. This interpretation aligns with developments in quantum mechanics and relativity, where space and time are generally treated as continuous at large scales. Some modern theories, such as loop quantum gravity, explore the possibility that space and time may have a discrete structure at the smallest scales, Planck length and Planck time, but for everyday motion the assumption of continuity remains valid. 4. Calculus and the resolution of Zeno's paradox. The development of calculus by Newton and Leibniz in the 17th century provided the mathematical tools necessary to fully resolve Zeno's paradoxes, including the stadium paradox. In calculus, motion is described using limits, derivatives, and integrals. A derivative describes how a quantity changes over an infinitely small interval of time, allowing us to define velocity and acceleration precisely. An integral allows us to calculate distances traveled over continuous intervals. The concept of a limit ensures that we can handle infinite subdivisions of time and space without leading to contradictions. Using these tools, modern physics describes motion in a way that fully accounts for relative speeds and avoids the paradoxical conclusions that Zeno proposed. 5. Implications for modern physics. The resolution of Zeno's paradox has implications beyond classical mechanics, particularly in Einstein's theory of relativity. In special relativity, motion is always measured relative to an observer's frame of reference, reinforcing the idea that the time an object takes to pass another depends on their relative velocities. This aligns with Aristotle's response and the modern mathematical treatment of motion. Furthermore, in general relativity, space and time are understood as a unified fabric that can be curved by mass and energy. This continuous nature of spacetime further supports the idea that Zeno's paradox is based on incorrect assumptions about the structure of reality. The stadium paradox, like Zeno's other paradoxes, highlights deep philosophical questions about motion, space, and time. While Zeno intended to challenge the coherence of motion, modern physics and mathematics provide a clear resolution. By recognizing that motion is continuous and that relative velocity explains differences in perceived speeds, we see that there is no real contradiction. The paradox ultimately serves as an important historical thought experiment that helped advance our understanding of motion, leading to significant developments in mathematics, physics, and philosophy. The Banach-Tarski paradox of infinite duplication. The Banach-Tarski paradox is one of the most mind-bending results in modern mathematics, directly challenging our intuitive understanding of space, volume, and the nature of objects. It boldly claims that it is possible, through purely mathematical means, to take a solid ball in three-dimensional space, cut it into a finite number of disjoint subsets, and then, by applying only rotations and translations, without stretching, scaling, or adding new material, reassemble those pieces into two identical solid balls, each the same size as the original. This isn't a trick or sleight of hand. Mathematically, the paradox holds true. It doesn't violate any logical rules within set theory and geometry, yet it appears to defy common sense. How can you take one ball, cut it into pieces, and end up with two balls of the same size? It feels like creating something from nothing, seemingly violating the fundamental law of conservation of mass. The role of the axiom of choice. The key to understanding how this is possible lies in the use of the axiom of choice, a principle in set theory. Introduced by Ernst Zermelo in 1904, the axiom of choice allows mathematicians to select elements from an infinite collection of sets, even when there is no explicit rule for making these selections. In the Banach-Tarski paradox, the axiom of choice is used to select points in the ball in an extremely non-constructive way. It enables the creation of sets that are so fragmented and irregular that they defy traditional notions of shape, size, and even volume. These sets are non-measurable, meaning they can't be assigned a well-defined volume in the usual sense. How the paradox works. To see how the paradox unfolds, consider these core components. 1. Decomposition into non-measurable sets. The original ball is divided into 5 disjoint subsets. These subsets are not smooth slices or anything like the pieces you'd get if you cut an apple. They are highly scattered, infinitely complex sets of points that can't be measured using standard geometric concepts. 2. Use of rotations and translations. No stretching or scaling occurs. The 5 strange subsets are merely rotated and translated in space. Through this process, they are rearranged into 2 separate solid balls, each identical in size to the original. 3. Infinity's role. The paradox exploits the counterintuitive nature of infinity. In the finite world, cutting something into pieces and rearranging them can't increase the total volume. But when working with infinite sets, especially in three-dimensional space, the usual rules don't apply. Infinity allows for these bizarre transformations. For group theory and free groups. A key part of the paradox is rooted in group theory, particularly in how rotations in three-dimensional space can be represented. The paradox leverages properties of what's called a free group, where combinations of rotations can generate complex, non-repeating structures. This mathematical machinery underpins how the ball's points can be shuffled in such an unintuitive way. Why it doesn't apply in the real world. The Banach-Tarski paradox is purely a mathematical construct. In the physical world, matter is made up of atoms, and there are clear limits to how finely something can be divided. You can't cut an apple into infinitely complex, non-measurable pieces. Moreover, the paradox assumes perfect mathematical points with no physical size, something that doesn't exist in the real universe. Additionally, real-world transformations must preserve mass and energy following the laws of physics. The Banach-Tarski paradox exists entirely in an abstract mathematical universe where such constraints don't apply. Implications and significance. Though the paradox doesn't reflect physical reality, it has profound implications for mathematics and philosophy. Challenges our understanding of volume. It shows that in higher mathematics, the notion of volume isn't as rigid as in everyday life. Volume isn't preserved under all types of transformations, especially when dealing with infinite sets and the axiom of choice. Raises philosophical questions. The paradox highlights the tension between mathematical abstraction and physical reality. If mathematics is supposed to model the real world, how do we reconcile the existence of such paradoxes that clearly can't occur in nature? Highlights the power of the axiom of choice. Without the axiom of choice, the Banach-Tarski paradox wouldn't be possible. This leads to debates within the mathematical community about whether the axiom of choice should be accepted. While it enables many powerful results, it also leads to deeply counterintuitive outcomes like Banach-Tarski. The Banach-Tarski paradox is a brilliant example of how mathematics can transcend the limits of intuition. It reveals the strange and often unsettling consequences of infinity and the axiom of choice. While it can't be realized in the physical world, it remains a cornerstone of set theory and geometric group theory, pushing the boundaries of how we think about space, volume, and the nature of reality itself. In mathematics, as the Banach-Tarski paradox demonstrates, the impossible is sometimes possible. Understanding the Banach-Tarski paradox. At its core, the Banach-Tarski paradox reveals a profound disconnect between our intuitive understanding of geometry and the abstract world of higher mathematics. It challenges the very foundations of how we think about space, volume, and the nature of objects, especially when infinity enters the equation. The paradox asserts that a solid three-dimensional ball can be split into a finite number of pieces, specifically 5, each so bizarrely constructed that they lack a well-defined volume. Yet, through simple rotations and translations, without any stretching or resizing, these fragmented sets can be reassembled into two identical copies of the original ball. This result seems like mathematical magic, but it arises naturally from the formal principles of set theory, group theory, and the powerful and controversial axiom of choice. The paradox highlights the limits of our intuition when grappling with the infinite and forces us to reconsider what we mean by volume and shape in the abstract mathematical universe. Non-measurable sets and the breakdown of volume. A key element of the Banach-Tarski paradox is the use of non-measurable sets. In classical geometry, we're accustomed to assigning volumes to objects, whether it's a simple cube, a sphere, or even more complex shapes. But not all sets of points in space are measurable in this sense. Measurable versus non-measurable. A measurable set is one for which you can define a well-behaved volume using standard methods like the Lebesgue measure in mathematics. For example, a ball with a radius of 1 unit has a clear, measurable volume based on the formula V equals 4/3 pi r superscript 3. However, in the Banach-Tarski construction, the ball is divided into non-measurable sets, collections of points so fragmented and scattered that they lack any definable volume. Imagine breaking a ball not into slices or chunks but into dust-like clouds of points rearranged in complex patterns that evade standard measurement. Why volume fails. In the physical world, when you cut an object, each piece retains a portion of the original mass and volume. But in the Banach-Tarski paradox, the pieces are so pathological that they sidestep these basic rules. When rearranged, they can form two full-sized balls, essentially duplicating the original volume, but without adding any new material. This bizarre result is possible because standard volume concepts don't apply to non Measurable sets. The role of the axiom of choice. The axiom of choice is the linchpin of the Banach-Tarski paradox. Introduced in the early 20th century, it allows mathematicians to make selections from infinitely many sets, even when there's no explicit rule for making those choices. How it enables the paradox. In the Banach-Tarski construction, the axiom of choice is used to select points from the original ball in a way that's impossible to describe explicitly. These points are chosen based on their positions relative to certain rotational symmetries, using group theory, allowing the construction of the non-measurable sets necessary for the paradox. Controversy and debate. While the axiom of choice is widely accepted in modern mathematics, it leads to many counterintuitive results, including the Banach-Tarski paradox and others like the existence of non-measurable sets. Some mathematicians have questioned whether such paradoxes undermine the axiom's validity, though it remains a cornerstone of set theory. How does the construction work? Though the details are complex, the Banach-Tarski paradox relies on a clever use of group theory, specifically the properties of free groups in three-dimensional space. 1. Symmetry and rotations. The paradox begins by analyzing how a sphere can be rotated in space. By focusing on a specific set of rotations that don't overlap neatly, called a free group, mathematicians can classify points on the sphere based on how they transform under these rotations. 2. Decomposition into sets. Using the axiom of choice, the sphere is divided into 5 non-measurable sets. These sets are constructed based on the behavior of the points under the chosen group of rotations. Each set is highly fragmented, like a dust cloud of points spread throughout the ball. 3. Reassembly. The 5 sets are then rotated and translated, but not stretched or distorted, in a precise way. Remarkably, after this process, the points from the original ball now form 2 complete, identical spheres, each the same size as the original. 4. No stretching or adding material. It's crucial to emphasize that no material is created or stretched in this process. The result arises purely from the abstract properties of infinite sets and the axiom of choice. Why it defies intuition but not mathematics. At first glance, the Banach-Tarski paradox seems to violate basic principles like the conservation of mass or the idea that volume should be preserved when rearranging parts of an object. In the physical world, this is certainly true. But the paradox exists entirely within the realm of pure mathematics, where the rules differ significantly. Infinite sets behave differently. In standard arithmetic, if you split an object in half, you get 2 smaller halves. But when dealing with infinite sets, the usual rules break down. A classic example is that the set of natural numbers 1, 2, 3 has the same size, cardinality, as the set of even numbers 2, 4, 6, even though the latter is clearly a subset of the former. Volume is not preserved for non-measurable sets. Since the Banach-Tarski pieces are non-measurable, the standard concept of volume doesn't apply. This is why the reassembly can duplicate the ball without violating mathematical rules. Physical reality versus mathematical abstraction. One of the most important clarifications is that the Banach-Tarski paradox does not apply to the physical world. Real objects are made of atoms and subatomic particles, and there are natural limits to how finely matter can be divided. You can't take a soccer ball, cut it into 5 pieces, and rearrange it into 2 identical soccer balls. Physics simply doesn't allow it. Quantum and atomic limits. In the physical world, matter is discrete at the atomic level. There's no way to split objects into the infinitely fragmented sets required by the Banach-Tarski construction. The role of mathematical idealization. The paradox operates in a world where objects are treated as infinite sets of points with no physical size, weight, or structure. It's an example of how mathematical models can sometimes produce results that are logically consistent but have no physical counterpart. Philosophical and mathematical significance. The Banach-Tarski paradox has profound implications, not just for pure mathematics but also for philosophy and the foundations of logic. Challenges the nature of volume and space. It forces us to reconsider what it means for an object to have volume, and highlights the limitations of our everyday intuitions when dealing with infinity. Axiom of choice under scrutiny. The paradox is one of the strongest demonstrations of the weirdness that the axiom of choice can produce. While the axiom is incredibly useful and enables many important mathematical results, examples like Banach, Tarski make some question whether its acceptance leads to contradictions with reality. Philosophical questions. The paradox blurs the line between mathematical abstraction and the physical universe. It raises questions about whether mathematics is purely a human invention or if it reveals deeper truths about reality, even when those truths seem impossible. Implications and interpretations. The Banach-Tarski paradox, though mathematically rigorous, presents results that starkly contrast with our everyday understanding of the physical world. The idea that one can take a single solid sphere, break it into a finite number of pieces, and reassemble those pieces into two identical spheres of the same size is profoundly counterintuitive. It challenges core notions of volume, space, and conservation, yet it remains perfectly valid within the abstract world of set-theoretic geometry. One of the most important clarifications regarding the Banach-Tarski paradox is that it does not suggest physical feasibility. In the tangible universe, objects are made of atoms and governed by the laws of physics, which impose strict limitations on how matter can be divided and manipulated. Atoms cannot be infinitely subdivided, and the fundamental principles of conservation of mass and energy prevent the duplication of matter without an external source. Thus, while the paradox allows for the duplication of a sphere in mathematical abstraction, it does not translate to a mechanism for creating real-world objects from nothing. The paradox operates within the realm of pure mathematics, where objects are treated as idealized constructs, collections of points without physical properties like mass or atomic structure. In this abstract setting, the pieces used in the Banach-Tarski construction are not solid chunks but highly fragmented, non-measurable sets. These sets are so complex and scattered that they defy conventional definitions of volume. As a result, the usual rules that govern how we perceive space and size in the physical world break down. This leads to one of the paradox's most profound implications. Volume is not an invariant property under all geometric transformations. In everyday experience, when we cut an apple or slice a cake, the total volume remains constant. The sum of the parts always equals the whole. However, in the abstract mathematical world that Banach and Tarski explored, this principle no longer holds. When certain transformations are applied, specifically those allowed by the axiom of choice, volume can be manipulated in ways that defy intuition. The role of the axiom of choice. The axiom of choice is central to the Banach-Tarski paradox. Introduced by Ernst Zermelo in 1904, this axiom asserts that for any collection of non-empty sets, it is possible to select exactly one element from each set, even if there is no explicit rule for making the selection. While this might seem innocuous, the axiom enables the construction of sets with bizarre and counterintuitive properties, such as the non-measurable pieces used in the Banach-Tarski decomposition. In the context of the paradox, the axiom of choice allows for the selection of individual points from the sphere in such a way that the resulting subsets defy standard volume measurements. These subsets are non-measurable because they do not have a well-defined volume under Lebesgue measure, the standard mathematical tool for measuring volume in Euclidean space. Without the axiom of choice, constructing these sets would be impossible, and the paradox would not hold. The reliance on the axiom of choice has sparked significant debate within the mathematical community. While the axiom is widely accepted and used in many areas of mathematics, its counterintuitive consequences, such as those demonstrated by the Banach-Tarski paradox, have led some to question its philosophical legitimacy. Can a mathematical principle that leads to such paradoxical results truly reflect any meaningful aspect of reality? Connections to modern mathematics. The Banach-Tarski paradox has had a profound influence on several branches of modern mathematics, pushing the boundaries of how we understand space, measure, and structure. While the paradox may seem like a mathematical curiosity at first glance, its implications reach deep into fields such as set theory, measure theory, geometric group theory, and logic. Measure theory and non-measurable sets. One of the most immediate impacts of the Banach-Tarski paradox is on measure theory, the mathematical study of generalized notions of size, length, area, and volume. In the classical sense, measure theory relies on the assumption that geometric objects have well-defined additive volumes, meaning that the volume of a whole is the sum of the volumes of its parts. The Banach-Tarski paradox shatters this assumption by constructing sets that lack a well-defined Lebesgue measure. Lebesgue measure works perfectly for most familiar shapes, like spheres, cubes, and polygons, but the paradox reveals that certain subsets of space simply cannot be measured in the conventional sense. These non-measurable sets don't have a defined volume, not zero, not infinite, just undefined. This forced mathematicians to more carefully delineate where measure theory applies and where it breaks down, leading to a more nuanced understanding of measurable and non-measurable sets. Geometric group theory and paradoxical decompositions. The Banach-Tarski paradox also has deep connections to geometric group theory, particularly in the study of how symmetries and transformations interact with space. A key element of the paradox is its reliance on specific types of transformations, rotations and translations. These movements are governed by mathematical groups, specifically the group of rotations in three-dimensional space, SO3. It turns out that the group of rotations in 3D space is non-amenable, a critical property that allows paradoxical decompositions like Banach-Tarski to exist. A group is called amenable if it behaves nicely with respect to measures, preserving volume under group actions. In 2 dimensions, the group of rotations is amenable, which is why Banach-Tarski type paradoxes don't occur with flat disks. But in 3 or more dimensions, non-amenability allows for the strange rearrangements that make the paradox possible. This insight has driven further exploration into the properties of mathematical groups and their applications, leading to the discovery of other paradoxical decompositions in higher dimensions and complex spaces. Set theory and the axiom of choice. In set theory, the Banach-Tarski paradox serves as one of the most striking illustrations of the power and potential pitfalls of the axiom of choice. The paradox highlights how the axiom can lead to results that defy physical intuition, prompting ongoing philosophical and mathematical debates about whether the axiom should be accepted as a foundational principle. Some branches of mathematics, such as constructive mathematics and intuitionistic logic, reject the axiom of choice precisely because of paradoxes like Banach-Tarski. In these frameworks, only sets that can be explicitly constructed are considered valid, preventing the kind of abstract selection that the axiom of choice allows. At the same time, the paradox has reinforced the importance of the axiom of choice in many other areas, where it enables powerful results that would otherwise be impossible. This duality has made Banach-Tarski a central example in discussions about the foundations of mathematics. Philosophical considerations. Beyond mathematics, the Banach-Tarski paradox raises deep philosophical questions about the nature of reality, the limits of mathematical abstraction, and the relationship between mathematical truth and physical experience. The nature of mathematical reality. One of the most fundamental philosophical questions prompted by the Banach-Tarski paradox is, what does it mean for a mathematical result to be true? The paradox demonstrates that within the rules of set theory and the axiom of choice, it is possible to duplicate a solid sphere. Yet, this result is completely disconnected from our physical reality, where matter cannot be infinitely subdivided and where conservation laws prevent such duplication. This disconnect leads to debates between mathematical Platonists, who believe that mathematical objects exist in an abstract, ideal realm independent of human thought, and formalists or constructivists, who see mathematics as a human-created system based on specific rules and symbols. For Platonists, the Banach-Tarski paradox reveals deep truths about the abstract world of mathematics. For constructivists, it may highlight the dangers of accepting axioms, like the axiom of choice, that allow for results with no physical or intuitive grounding. Infinity and the limits of intuition. The paradox also forces us to confront the strange and often counterintuitive nature of infinity. In everyday life, we are accustomed to dealing with finite objects and quantities, where splitting something results in smaller pieces. But infinity plays by different rules. In set theory, for example, it is well known that infinite sets can behave in unexpected ways. The set of natural numbers is infinite, yet it has the same cardinality as the set of even numbers, a concept that defies everyday logic. The Banach-Tarski paradox extends this strangeness to geometry, showing that when dealing with infinite sets of points, familiar properties like volume can break down completely. It highlights the fact that human intuition, shaped by finite experiences, may not be equipped to fully grasp the implications of infinite mathematics. Mathematical models versus physical reality. Finally, the Banach-Tarski paradox brings into sharp focus the relationship between mathematical models and physical reality. Mathematics is often described as the language of the universe, capable of modeling everything from the motion of planets to the behavior of subatomic particles. Yet, the paradox reminds us that mathematics can also produce results that have no physical counterpart. This raises the question, to what extent does mathematics describe reality, and when does it simply explore abstract possibilities? In physics, the laws of nature impose constraints that prevent paradoxes like Banach-Tarski from manifesting. Matter is made up of atoms, which cannot be subdivided indefinitely, and conservation laws prohibit the creation of mass from nothing. But in the purely abstract realm of set theory, no such limitations exist. This distinction is crucial not only in mathematics but also in the philosophy of science, where it informs debates about the nature of scientific theories and models. It highlights the importance of understanding the assumptions underlying any mathematical framework and recognizing the boundaries between abstraction and reality. The Banach-Tarski paradox remains a fascinating and thought-provoking result in mathematics. It challenges our perceptions of space and volume, illustrating the complexities that arise when dealing with infinite sets and the axiom of choice. While it does not have direct physical applications, the paradox enriches our understanding of mathematical theory and encourages ongoing exploration into the foundations of mathematics. The Raven paradox, a deeper exploration. The Raven paradox, first proposed by German philosopher Carl Gustav Hempel in the 1940s, presents a unique challenge to our understanding of scientific reasoning, logic, and evidence. At its core, the paradox forces us to rethink what it means to confirm a hypothesis and whether indirect evidence can be considered just as valid as direct observation. To fully grasp the paradox, we must break it down logically, explore why it seems counterintuitive, and examine the different philosophical attempts to resolve it. Along the way, we will consider real-world implications and examples that highlight the paradox's relevance beyond abstract logic. Logical foundation of the Raven paradox. The Raven paradox is rooted in the fundamental principles of logic and scientific reasoning. To fully understand why it presents such a challenge, we need to carefully dissect its logical structure and the implications it carries. The core hypothesis at the heart of this paradox is the statement, all ravens are black. This is a universal generalization, meaning it applies to every raven in existence. In formal logic, universal statements like this are typically expressed in a conditional form. If something is a raven, then it is black. This statement implies that there cannot be a single raven that is not black. If we were to find even one non-black raven, the entire hypothesis would be immediately falsified. However, if we continue to find only black ravens, we might feel increasingly confident in our hypothesis. The contrapositive, a logical equivalence. A crucial concept in logic is that every conditional statement has a logically equivalent contrapositive. The contrapositive of the statement, if something is a raven, then it is black, is. If something is not black, then it is not a raven. In logic, a statement and its contrapositive are always equivalent. This means that if our original claim all ravens are black is true, then its contrapositive all non-black things are non-ravens must also be true. For example, if we claim that all cats have tails, the contrapositive would be, if something does not have a tail, then it is not a cat. Both statements must be equally valid. If one is true, the other must also be true. Applying confirmation theory. Now, this is where the paradox becomes counterintuitive. In science and logic, a hypothesis is generally confirmed by observations that support it and challenged by observations that contradict it. If we are testing the claim all ravens are black, there are three types of observations we can make. 1. Observing a black raven. This directly supports our hypothesis, as it is consistent with the claim. 2. Observing a non-black raven. This would immediately falsify the hypothesis, proving that not all ravens are black. 3. Observing a non-black, non-raven object, such as a red apple. This observation does not contradict the claim. Since the contrapositive all non-black things are non-ravens is logically equivalent to our original hypothesis, observing a non-black, non-raven object technically supports the hypothesis. This last point is what makes the raven paradox so perplexing. It suggests that every time we see a non-black object that is not a raven, such as a white chair, a green watermelon, or a blue car, we are indirectly confirming that all ravens are black. Why does this seem so strange? In everyday reasoning, we do not think of confirming a claim by looking at things that seem entirely unrelated to it. Suppose a scientist wants to confirm that all whales live in the ocean. We would expect them to study whales, not to examine land animals. And yet, following the logic of the raven paradox, observing a non-ocean-dwelling animal, like a giraffe or a tiger, would count as evidence supporting the claim. This defies our intuition. We expect meaningful evidence to come from direct observations rather than from indirect confirmations of logically equivalent statements. The paradox highlights a tension between strict logical reasoning and how we usually interpret scientific evidence. The problem of infinite observations. One particularly strange implication of the raven paradox is that, if we take its logic seriously, every time we observe a non-black object that is not a raven, we are gathering more confirmation for our hypothesis. Since the world contains an almost infinite number of non-black things, clouds, books, bricks, oceans, human skin, etc., we would be accumulating an overwhelming amount of supporting evidence without ever having observed a single raven. This seems absurd. Our intuition tells us that the best way to confirm the claim, all ravens are black, is to look at ravens, not at random objects of other colors. But logically, the contrapositive forces us to consider all non-black, non-raven observations as weak but valid confirmations of our claim. A thought experiment. The warehouse of objects. To illustrate the paradox more clearly, imagine that you are standing in a giant warehouse filled with millions of different objects. Tables, books, animals, cars, fruits, and so on. Some of these objects are black and some are other colors. Some are ravens but most are not. If you are trying to confirm the statement, all ravens are black, you could take two different approaches. One. Direct observation approach. You could search for ravens and check their color. If every raven you find is black, this increases your confidence in the hypothesis. 2. Contrapositive approach. Instead of looking for ravens, you could search for non-black objects, like red apples, yellow bananas, and blue balloons, and check whether any of them turn out to be ravens. If you never find a non-black raven among them, this technically supports the contrapositive statement. If something is not black, then it is not a raven, which is logically equivalent to our original hypothesis. The second approach, while logically valid, feels ridiculous. Why should looking at thousands of bananas and confirming that they are not ravens be considered evidence that all ravens are black? This is the heart of the paradox. Our common-sense understanding of evidence is at odds with the strict formal logic of confirmation theory. Scientific and philosophical implications. The raven paradox is not just an abstract puzzle. It has serious implications for how we think about scientific reasoning and hypothesis testing. In real-world scientific practice, researchers prioritize direct evidence over indirect confirmations. For instance, in medicine, a doctor testing the hypothesis, all cases of disease X involve a fever, will look at actual patients with disease X rather than healthy people without fevers. However, the paradox reminds us that confirmation is not always straightforward. It forces us to question. How do we determine what counts as valid evidence for a hypothesis? Should indirect evidence be given equal weight as direct observations? How does our intuition about confirmation differ from formal logic? The paradox also plays a role in the philosophy of science, where it raises questions about the nature of inductive reasoning, the process of drawing general conclusions from specific observations. Scientists rely heavily on induction to make broad claims about the world, but the raven paradox exposes some of its underlying complexities. Ultimately, the raven paradox is a fascinating example of how formal logic can lead to conclusions that seem deeply counterintuitive. It highlights the difference between logical validity and practical reasoning, challenging us to reconsider how we define and evaluate scientific evidence. Real-world examples of the raven paradox. The Raven paradox highlights a conflict between logical confirmation theory and how we intuitively assess evidence in everyday situations. To better grasp its implications, we can examine real-world scenarios where similar reasoning could be applied. These examples will illustrate why the paradox feels counterintuitive and how its logic does not always align with practical reasoning. Example 1. Medical testing and diagnosis. Imagine a doctor testing the hypothesis. All patients with disease X have a high fever. The direct way to confirm this hypothesis is to examine individuals diagnosed with disease X and check if they all have high fevers. If every patient with disease X has a fever, it strengthens the hypothesis. If even a single patient has the disease but does not have a fever, the hypothesis is disproven. However, according to the logic of the Raven paradox, observing a healthy individual who does not have disease X and also does not have a fever is technically evidence in favor of the hypothesis. Since the contrapositive of the statement is, if someone does not have a high fever, then they do not have disease X. Each time a healthy person without a fever is observed, it should, in theory, confirm the hypothesis that all disease X patients have fevers. This logic, while formally correct, feels completely counterproductive in medical science. Doctors do not typically confirm disease hypotheses by studying healthy individuals. They focus on direct cases rather than relying on the absence of symptoms in the general population. In practical medicine, confirmation comes from examining affected individuals, not from checking people who do not have the disease. Example 2. Security screening at airports. Consider airport security officers working with the hypothesis. All terrorists carry explosives. The intuitive approach to testing this would be to search actual terrorists and check whether they possess explosives. If explosives are found, the hypothesis is supported. If a terrorist is found without explosives, the hypothesis is immediately disproven. However, under the Raven paradox, searching a random traveler, confirming they are not a terrorist, and finding that they do not have explosives is also evidence in favor of the hypothesis. This follows from the contrapositive. If someone does not carry explosives, then they are not a terrorist. Thus, every time security searches a harmless passenger and finds no explosives, they are, technically, gathering evidence supporting the claim that all terrorists carry explosives. But in real-world security operations, this logic is flawed. While random screenings may be useful in identifying threats, finding non-terrorists without explosives does not meaningfully confirm anything about actual terrorists. Security measures are designed to detect direct threats, not to confirm theories by accumulating irrelevant observations. Example 3. Criminal investigations and profiling. Suppose a detective is investigating a string of crimes and working with the hypothesis. All members of Gang Z are involved in illegal activities. To confirm this, the detective could 1. Investigate members of Gang Z and see if they are engaged in criminal behavior, direct confirmation. 2. Identify a member of Gang Z who is not involved in crime, which would disprove the hypothesis. But according to the Raven paradox, finding a random law-abiding citizen who is not in Gang Z also supports the hypothesis. Since the contrapositive of the statement is, if someone is not involved in illegal activities, then they are not a member of Gang Z. Every time the detective observes a non-criminal person and confirms that they are not part of Gang Z, the hypothesis gains more evidence. In reality, however, this reasoning is impractical. Police investigations focus on actual members of the gang, rather than on confirming the absence of crime among uninvolved citizens. If law enforcement followed the logic of the Raven paradox, they would waste time studying innocent people instead of investigating actual gang members. Example 4. Climate change and global warming. Consider a climate scientist studying the hypothesis. All industrial emissions contribute to global warming. A direct way to test this would be to measure the effects of industrial emissions on temperature trends. If every instance of industrial pollution correlates with warming, the hypothesis is strengthened. If pollution is found in places without warming, the hypothesis is challenged. However, under the logic of the Raven paradox, every time we observe a non-industrial source, such as an unpolluted forest or a small rural village, and confirm that it does not contribute to global warming, we are indirectly supporting the hypothesis. The contrapositive of the hypothesis is, if something does not contribute to global warming, then it is not an industrial emission. So, by this reasoning, every time a scientist studies a tree, a glacier, or an ocean current and finds that they do not produce industrial emissions, they are technically confirming the original hypothesis. But in real-world climate science, this is not a meaningful way to test the hypothesis. Scientists do not verify theories about industrial emissions by studying forests. They gather direct evidence from factories, vehicles, and other sources of pollution. Example 5. Sports and performance analysis. A coach might make the claim, all elite athletes train at least 5 hours a day. To confirm this, the coach could 1. Look at elite athletes and check if they train for 5 or more hours daily. 2. Find an elite athlete who does not train that much, which would disprove the hypothesis. But according to the logic of the Raven paradox, observing an amateur or non-athlete who does not train for 5 hours also counts as evidence. Since the contrapositive is, if someone does not train for 5 hours, then they are not an elite athlete. Every time the coach meets a random person who doesn't train that much and confirms that they are not an elite athlete, they are, technically, gathering evidence in favor of the original claim. However, in the real world, this is not how sports science works. Coaches do not confirm elite training habits by looking at casual joggers or office workers. Instead, they study high-level athletes directly. Why the Raven paradox feels counterintuitive in these examples. Each of these real-world scenarios reveals a common pattern. The paradox arises because logic dictates that both direct and indirect confirmations count as valid evidence. However, in practical reasoning, we strongly prefer direct observations over indirect ones. Gathering evidence from irrelevant cases, healthy patients, non-terrorists, forests, amateur athletes, feels absurd, even if it is logically valid. Attempts to resolve the paradox. The Raven paradox presents a deep challenge to our understanding of scientific reasoning and how evidence supports hypotheses. Because it leads to counterintuitive conclusions, philosophers and logicians have attempted to resolve it in ways that reconcile formal logic with real-world intuition. Several key approaches have been proposed, each offering a different way to make sense of the paradox. One of the most widely accepted resolutions is the idea that not all pieces of evidence are equally relevant in confirming a hypothesis. This perspective argues that while non-black, non-raven observations do technically support the claim that all ravens are black, they are far less informative than direct observations of actual ravens. Imagine a detective investigating a crime. If the detective finds fingerprints at the scene, this is strong evidence. If the detective finds that a random person in another city had nothing to do with the crime, this is also technically evidence, but it is almost useless. The same logic applies to the Raven paradox. Some observations contribute meaningfully, while others contribute trivially. Applying this reasoning to the paradox, seeing black ravens provides strong confirmation of the hypothesis because it directly relates to the claim being tested. Observing non-black objects, such as red apples or blue cars, provides weak confirmation because it does not actually test ravens at all. By recognizing that not all forms of evidence are equally strong, the paradox is resolved by simply prioritizing direct evidence over indirect evidence. This aligns with how scientists actually work. They focus on direct observations rather than irrelevant ones. Another major approach to resolving the paradox comes from Bayesian probability theory, which provides a way to measure how much new evidence changes our confidence in a hypothesis. Bayesian reasoning is based on the idea that we start with a prior belief and update it as we gather new evidence. If a new observation significantly changes our belief, it provides strong confirmation. If an observation does not change our belief at all, it provides little to no confirmation. In the case of the Raven paradox, observing a black raven strongly increases confidence in the statement, all ravens are black, because it is direct, relevant evidence. Observing a non-black, non-raven object, like a red apple, barely changes confidence at all because it is already expected that most objects in the world are non-black and non-ravens. While a red apple technically confirms the hypothesis under strict logic, it adds so little new information that its effect is negligible. This explains why it is intuitively dismissed as meaningful evidence. Another way to challenge the paradox is to consider the sheer number of non-black objects in the world. If every non-black object confirmed the hypothesis equally, then the vast majority of confirmation would come from objects that have nothing to do with ravens. The universe contains an overwhelming number of non-black things: red cars, white clouds, green leaves, and countless others. If each one of these non-black things were counted as meaningful evidence, then the world would be drowning in an infinite sea of evidence, without ever having observed a single raven. This absurd conclusion suggests that confirmation should only be counted when it comes from direct, relevant sources, meaning that only observing black ravens should be considered true evidence for the hypothesis. This perspective forces a reconsideration of what should count as evidence and recognizes that while non-black objects may technically support the hypothesis, their practical contribution is insignificant. Since science relies on meaningful observations, the paradox dissolves when it is accepted that only directly relevant evidence should matter. The paradox was originally proposed by Carl Gustav Hempel, who did not necessarily see it as a problem. Instead, he argued that it reveals a fundamental truth about how logic works. He maintained that logical equivalence means that observing a non-black, non-raven object must provide some level of confirmation for the hypothesis. While this may seem counterintuitive, it follows directly from the rules of formal logic. However, he acknowledged that the amount of confirmation provided by a non-black, non-raven object is so small that it is practically irrelevant. Hempel did not see the paradox as something that needed to be solved, but rather as a demonstration of the subtle ways logic and intuition diverge. A final way to address the paradox is to distinguish between formal logic and practical scientific reasoning. Formal logic treats all valid observations as confirmation, no matter how indirect, while scientific practice focuses on relevant, testable, and falsifiable evidence. In real-world science, researchers do not waste time looking at irrelevant data. Instead, they seek direct evidence, use falsifiability as a key criterion by actively searching for exceptions rather than just gathering confirming evidence, and consider context and probability, favoring observations that meaningfully affect confidence in a hypothesis. This distinction highlights why the paradox does not pose an issue for actual scientific investigation. Scientists do not count red apples as evidence for raven color because they are interested in meaningful, not just technically valid, confirmation. Why the raven paradox still matters. Even though the raven paradox may seem like an obscure philosophical puzzle, it raises profound questions about how we gather knowledge, test hypotheses, and interpret evidence. In science, it challenges the way we confirm universal claims and highlights the importance of direct versus indirect evidence. In philosophy, it exposes the limits of formal logic when applied to real-world reasoning. In statistics and probability, it reinforces the idea that some observations carry more weight than others in updating our beliefs. The paradox forces us to confront the fact that logic and intuition do not always align. While logical reasoning provides a strict, formal framework for evaluating evidence, human intuition often favors practical, real-world methods that prioritize direct observations. Ultimately, the raven paradox serves as a reminder that the process of confirming hypotheses is not always as straightforward as it seems. It challenges us to think more critically about what counts as evidence and how we should approach scientific reasoning in a way that makes both logical and practical sense. Conclusion. Paradoxes challenge our understanding of reality, pushing the boundaries of logic, science, and philosophy. They reveal the hidden complexities and concepts we often take for granted: motion, probability, logic, space, and even life itself. What do these paradoxes mean to you? How do they shape the way we think about the universe? Could they hold the key to future breakthroughs in science, AI, or space exploration? Next time you encounter something that seems impossible, ask yourself, is it truly impossible or just a paradox waiting to be unraveled? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and let paradoxes guide you toward deeper insights. Subscribe now for more mind-bending paradoxes, deep dive explanations, and thought-provoking discussions on science, logic, and the mysteries of the universe.